The lights are off and away they go.
Extremely loose. He's managed to hold on and they get
He
very
missed
close.
the complete. He's crazy
Side by side,
stuff.
Freitas is on the grass on the infield floor. He slides through, he tags Richard Eck.
Welcome to Daytona International Speedway, home of the opening round in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series, the 2.4 Hours of Daytona. Today marks the start to the 2014 season, and you're watching it live on the Global Sim Racing channel. I'm your host, Joe Peak. Joining me in the booth today are Kevin Brown and Dusty Peterson. Welcome back, Kevin. Ready for another year?
I am indeed, Joe, and I'm looking forward to today's race. This is a stacked and fast field.
Dusty, glad to have you back involved with Conti as well.
Yeah, it's great to be back. This is kind of where it all started for me with a lot of the hosted racing. So it's really interesting to see a lot of familiar names, new faces, and to be looking at it from the other side of the booth.
Absolutely. And as always, our director is the diligent Giancarlo Lenzi. As we mentioned, we are at Daytona, the traditional season starter for many a series, both sports cars and NASCAR. But we're on the road course today. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Love to. Daytona International Speedway is one of my favorite tracks, and the road course is just a lot of fun to drive at. It is fast, it is slippery, it's technical, and it always puts on some great action. Technically, it's 3.56 miles or 5.7 kilometers. There's 11 or 12 turns, depending on who's counting and how they're counting. Today, we're looking at about 2.4 hours around that. And a couple hot spots to look for are turn 1, which is when they come off of the banking and start their journey through the infield. And there's going to be a lot of action of passing going on. Probably going to see a lot of spins and some wrecks right there. And then the other place to look for is how do drivers stack up in the two horseshoes, the Western Horseshoe and the International Horseshoe, and make sure that they don't accidentally punt somebody else off or see that going. We're bound to see a lot of spinners today.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a stacked field. I believe we have at least one of our champions here today, and that is James Stevenson and the ST class. He was our champion of Season 4 at the end of last year. However, Kimmo Suominen was not able to make the race today, and he was our GS class champion last year. But I believe both of those guys are going to return and be fighting it out all year long to try and get their crown back. But before we talk any more about how that championship is going to play out and some of the big name players in the field here, let's take a lap around here so that we can get a feel for what it's like inside the car. Alright, we're coming up to the tri-oval portion of Daytona International Speedway, which is going to be the start-finish line, and that's going to lead you right into turn 1, so you want to let the car drift to the right side, and this is going to be one of the trickiest braking zones on the whole course, because it's curved, but you also come off of the banking there. Now you'll have this little chicane here, a right then a left, and it's going to take you to the International Horseshoe, and it's going to be pretty heavy braking, because this is a slower corner than you would expect. And you want to get a decent exit off of here, and then just let it drift back to the right and get yourself ready for the kink, which is turn 4. Now this kink is a lot easier in the Miatas. In the Mustangs, it's fairly tricky, and that's going to dump you right into the braking zone of turn 5, the Western Horseshoe, which could be a passing zone if you get a good enough exit of 3 and you're brave. Now, coming up to turn 6, it seems pretty unassuming. It's a 90-degree left-hander, pretty straightforward. but it's one of the most important corners on this track. You want to get the exit as good as you can. You really don't want to botch the exit, because if you're slow on this next portion here on the oval, you're basically a sitting duck. If someone gets any hint of the draft, they're either going to catch you or they're just going to blow right by you before you even get to the braking zone of 9, which is the bus stop. As you can see, you just take a line close to the yellow lines there at the bottom. And now getting ready for the bus stop, you're going to want to play chicken with these curbs here. Try and straighten it out as much as you can without getting into the grass. And again, focus on a good exit. If someone outbrakes you into there, don't worry about it too much. Just try and get as good of an exit as you can. And you might get a chance to get them back before you get to turn 1 if you get in their draft. And once again, it's just pretty simple here on out to the start-finish line. You keep it down on the yellow and then let it track out as you come out of NASCAR 4 up towards the start-finish line. Hopefully you got somebody's draft helping and pulling you along, and you can try and attempt to pass. But that's a lap around Daytona International Speedway. Welcome back. That was a great lap from Kevin there. But we are in the midst of qualifying, and actually the Mustangs just took to the track since the ST guys just finished. But before we talk about some of that, one thing I want to talk about that's different this year, because there are some significant changes about the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series and how the races are going to play out this year. Kevin, this one is always a bit of a longer race. It's 2.4 hours as it has been since Season 2. But over the course of the year, the guys are going to have to get used to just a little bit more time on the track.
Yeah, absolutely. All the races now are 2 hours, I believe it is. So it's a little bit longer race that they're going to have to deal with each round. And but, you know, these guys have gotten pretty used to running 90-minute races. I don't think this is going to be too much of a challenge for them, honestly.
Yes, we've seen, you know, the big names that tend to pop up as the race continues to go on, the guys that know how to stay out of trouble and have the speed. But at the same time, one of the things the viewers will have to get used to is the fact that there's going to be different pit stop strategy, because they've still kept the same fuel loads. So these guys will have to make 2 stops instead of 1, and it's just going to make things all the more varied. And especially today, Dusty, with the full course cautions. I know we were talking about that a little bit while we were watching that lap.
Yeah, definitely. Back when I was driving in CESCS, when it was a little more in its early stages, depending on the track and the drivers and everything like that, the full course yellows could be a really big deal in the race as far as how much time you get to run at a green flag. So strategy is a big deal. We've had a lot of new talent come in, a lot of more, you know, higher skilled, very competitive drivers. So I'm sort of interested to see how much that's going to affect things, if the extra competition is going to make things a little more hairy, give us maybe a few more cautions, or if the extra skill is going to smooth things out a little bit, and we'll see a little more green flag racing.
Yeah, you're right in that there's a lot of drivers who've kind of jumped in, who've kind of upped the level of the competition since last year. I mean, we had Kimo Suominen come in and definitely up the ante. But Kevin, we've got guys like Sergio Mora and Amjad Yaman who have come into here, Jer Janis, at least on the ST side, and also a number of guys on the Mustang side as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking to see what Darius Bailowski can do. I've heard some great things about his speed, and I don't often get to see you know, somebody ahead of Dan on the practice list as far as fast time. So it's really exciting. We've got a really close pack at the front of the field. A lot of really fast guys. A number of guys who are you know, actual championship winners in the official iRacing this season. You know, for the Mustang. And things like that. So I think it's going to be pretty intense.
Yeah, and the other thing, though, is even though they may be champions, we saw this with Eric Smith in previous seasons, where he was one of those official iRacing champions, and that guy has the speed. Now, granted, he has worked out some of his demons in long-run endurance racing, but he hasn't always performed as well trying to keep his car on track, Kevin. He had some trouble trying to make it the whole way, keeping out of trouble and keeping his car up at the sharp end of the field.
Yeah, that was definitely a struggle for Eric Smith, and we've seen that as well this season in another series where driver Joao Vaz is very, very fast, but new to lap traffic and has struggled mightily. So this could be, this is very much a theme for these drivers. If they may be very, very fast in their car, but how good are they at dealing with slower class traffic or faster class traffic as it relates? And we know that Sergio Mora and Jared Janis are both very, very good drivers in the MX-5, and they have run mixed class racing, but with cars similar to their pace. So how are they going to be able to adapt a little bit more in Conti and have to deal with the much faster GS Mustangs blitzing by them, and how are they going to deal with that strategy is a very key point.
And talking about the strategy, since those pit stops are going to be a part of that, I want to hear from both of you guys about how the tires are going to play out, because we've got a new tire model for, I believe, both cars this season, or I'm sorry, this year for this series at least, and it's kind of changed how they have to think about it as the race goes on.
That'll be really interesting to see. I managed to have some time to get some laps down at this track with the Mustang for the first time for me in a while. So we are on a new version, the version 5 of the new tire model with the Mustang now. Last time I was driving it was with the original version of the new tire model, or the first version of the new tire model on this particular car. Now before, as they said, the car would sort of wear out over the race, and the Mustang's tendency to push would get worse and worse unless you were really gentle on it. But the new version, the front tires don't seem to wear out quite as long, quite as fast, and the car seems to sort of stick with you a bit longer. Kevin, I think, also had a little more experience with that.
Yeah, Dusty, it did seem to me, especially with the Mustang, that a lot of the tire wear that we saw, especially on the front tires on this car last season and previously, just isn't there anymore. So it looks like drivers may be able to run a fast pace for much longer stints than we used to see. Whereas in the MX-5, it seems like the car is pretty much the same. They're just on bricks for tires that will last for, decades and decades. It seems like you can run about 5 races on the same set of tires, just about.
Now, one thing that I've noticed, tell me if I'm kind of on the right line here, in the time that I've spent with the newest tire model and the way it tends to heat up and things like that, we don't have as much of the issue where the tires are fastest when they're cold. So they do kind of come into you a little bit, and that varies from car to car. But we've talked about the front tires. What I've noticed is that, especially compared to the old tire model, the rear tires, especially on a car like the Mustang, where it's real high power and it's really easy to spin up those tires on corner exit, I found that heat that you get from spinning up those rear tires can really wash out the rear tires very, very fast. Now, they do cool down very quickly too if you're easy with it, but it can the rear end of the car can get really loose really quick on you if you're not careful.
Yeah, it can, and I think, the pointy end of the GS field, we're going to see guys running very, very loose setups to help that car rotate so that they can get on the power just as quickly as they can to set up for the big, long bank sections. And, how are they going to deal with that? If they get the car too loose and can't get on the power, they're just going to be a sitting duck out there on the NASCAR banking, and guys are just going to go right past them. Because one thing that we've noticed, especially today, is that the Mustangs have a much better draft than they used to in previous seasons, Dusty.
Yeah, I do believe I saw some bump drafting going on in the practice. That's a new thing for me, and that's interesting, exciting. I mean, these things are big bricks flying through the air. Drafting is a huge deal. So if the changes in the collision model and the aerodynamics and stuff are allowing these guys to really make contact like that and push them around, I have a feeling that, people are going to have to work together a lot, and we might see that the people that are in closer knit teams are maybe going to have a bit of advantage here.
Right, and we do know that, for the ST field, those teams are a huge part. There's Asbury Motorsports is well represented, and they were kind of pumping themselves up a little bit earlier today with talk about maybe they could get a 1-2-3 going today, which in this field is going to be pretty tough.
Yes, it's definitely we're looking at the qualifying times, and everything is pretty darn close, especially up at the sharp end of the MX-5 field. So speaking of the qualifying, we've got about maybe a little over 2 minutes left to go on that. We're going to give you the qualifying as soon as that is done and over with. However, We mentioned a little bit earlier that the race or the season for the Conti series is going on for the entirety of this year. That is going to be new for this season. But previously, they've run for about 6 months, took a little bit of a break, and then brought it back so that they had 2 seasons over the course of the year. This one is playing like the Real World Series. It's you got an entire year, which means as each race is over, you have quite a while to sit back and breathe and try and get yourself collected and get some practice in for the next round, which, you know, with the upped talent, Kevin, and the extra practice time, I have to imagine that we're going to see very, very tight fields.
Yeah, I think so, Joe. It's definitely looking that way, you know, and to kind of segue with that, the back end of the schedule towards the fall starts getting a lot busier, where there's a couple of rounds that kind of come one on top of each other. So these drivers, they're going to have to change that as well. They're going to be used to having a month-long break between rounds, and then all of a sudden they're going to have to deal with them being almost every week. But yeah, we've seen some very, very, very tight action at the front of the GS field and at the front of the ST field, and maybe we should go walk through ST qualifying, Joe.
Absolutely. Since those guys have all got their laps in, we're just waiting on the Mustangs right now. Let's hop through that field order for the ST class. Leading the times, Sergio Mora, Kevin, has grabbed the pole, which is interesting that he is above James Stevenson. However, it's a long race and it's a draft pack, so qualifying isn't quite as important here. Jer Janis starts in second, filling out the front row. James Stevenson qualifies third, an unusual spot for him. Richard Losper starts fourth. Very well done from Richard to be able to get up. He's moved up in speed since we last seen him in this series. Marco Mogren is in fifth. George Britton is in sixth. Amjad Yaman is in seventh. Bill Randleman is in eighth. Ninth is Stefan Oergaard. And 10th, Kevin, is Arthur Chan.
11th is Hang Ho Tao. 12th is Russell Clayson, who has forsaken the Mustang for the MX-5. 13th, Travis Mim. 14th, Stefan Morian. Then Matthew Reinl, Ed Baraz, Tom Eklund, and David Wamman will be running out your ST field.
So that's how that order stands. It looks like we've just got the checkered flag, so drivers are finishing up their hot lap in the Mustangs as the GS class completes their qualifying. I'm going to check with our director to see if we should run through that now. All right, let's head through that right now. Brian Strodbeck is currently at the top of the times, although this is unofficial. There could be guys that snipe the order. Dan Rash is starting in second. Patrick Bieri is in third. Oscar Solin is in fourth. Darius Bielowski is in fifth. J.D. Baumgartner is in sixth. Andre Trego, seventh. Elliot Huffman is 8th. Andrew Casey is in 9th. And Nicholas Bailey is 10th. Dusty?
Following them up, we've got, for the rest of the field in the Mustangs, we've got Wayne C. Bork in 11th. Diljan Boldrin in 12th. Alexi Molina in 13th. Steve Brown in 14th. Matthew Oak in 15th. German Afanador in 16th. Jason Breifogel in 17th. In 18th, Jeff Jacobs. 19th, James Alex Brown. 20th, Braith Morrow, and then to round up the field, we've got Tim Brokaw, Danny Locke, Mike Main, and Philip Carpenter.
And that's your field for this 2.4 hours of Daytona. It is a packed house. 42 cars have put laps down, and I believe that is one shy of a completely full field here at Daytona. We should be completely done, as I believe everybody's had a chance to try and get around at this point. So we've got, one other thing that I want to touch on before these guys grid up is, Kevin, some of these guys, you talked about the endurance racing, how they're not as familiar with the long form and whatnot, and we need to see whether they can do well over the long run as well as hot lap. But the other thing that this series brings to the table that a lot of road guys are not familiar with is restarts, and that is something that you've got to work on and learn. It's a skill.
It very much is a skill, and it's one that we've seen affect this series and this race very much. We believe that one of the themes for this race will be that yellows will bring more yellows, and with the field stacking up after a restart, how are drivers going to be able to handle being around other close drivers as they come through the go through the infield on cold tires?
Yeah, very much so. It's gonna make it a little bit interesting as guys try to get the heat into them and try. Maybe we won't see as many eager moves as guys figure out that they can't really risk it when it comes back to green flag racing. Drivers are actually getting on the grid right now, and they're going to do a pace lap around here. So we're going to get ready to start the 2014 season very soon here. Dusty, I have to ask, even though I know you're a bit of a newcomer here in the booth for Conti, who are you looking forward to? Who are your calls for today and maybe even for the season?
Well, I mean, obviously, you can't deny that Dan Rash is an extremely fast Mustang driver. I'd have to put him as my favorite just because I've seen what he can do over and over again. Of course, I know we've got some new covers. I'm really excited to see what Darius can do. I've heard a lot about his driving. It's great to see Brian up on top, just like you guys were saying a second ago, that he's very fast here at Daytona. I'm hoping, it'll be interesting to see. You've got the really fast guys, and then you've got the really consistent guys, and it's always a battle between, when you've got the points for the whole season, who's going to be up top. But I think probably my favorite's going to be Dan this time.
And to give you an idea of just how close it is between Rash and Strodbeck, there was less than 5/100ths of a second between the pole and Dan. So incredibly tight up there. What about you, Kevin? In the ST class, who are you kind of thinking might have it this season?
Well, this season might be a little early to project, but for this round, I think I'm going to have to go with Shane Stevenson. We know he's very, 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 very fast in the car, and we've seen that he's very good at endurance racing. And with his teammate lined up next to him, I kind of have the suspicion that they're just going to lock down in the draft together and just start banging out laps and be ready for the finish, which we've seen can be somewhat exciting, as I think it was only 2 seasons ago when we saw that 3-way crash across the finish in the ST field that Chris Moran won.
Yeah, we always say it ain't over till it's over, but it's doubly true here at Daytona. This has been the race that just continues to throw up unusual results. As you said, Chris Moran, I believe that was his only win in this series. Same thing with, I'm sorry, the name escapes me, the 49 Motorsports driver who won last season. Dexter Castro, I'm sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart. The drivers have actually just taken off. The pace car is leading them around, so we're getting ready to go very soon here. They're going to get single file until the bus stop, and then they'll double back up, and the season will get underway. But yeah, it's even though on the Mustang side it's been mostly predictable as far as the top runners getting the wins, with the MX-5s relying so much more on the draft, this is very much a toss-up here.
A toss-up indeed, and that's no idea what we're going to actually see, but it's going to be fun to watch. Most of these MX-5 drivers know each other pretty well, so it's going to be a very interesting mind battle to see who's going to attack and when they're going to choose to attack.
And Mind Battle is right on the mark. This is very much a psychological track. We saw it a few weeks ago, maybe I think it was about a month ago, with the Enduro Pro Series, that one of the drivers was kind of just holding back, following that draft late in the race, and I believe it was in the C3 class in that race, that he was actually sizing up the person in front of him and getting a feel for what the draft can do and exactly how, when he needs to slingshot, how far back does he need to be out of the bus stop to be past him at the line. So there's so much more than just the raw speed around here, Dusty, that these guys need to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, how appropriate that, a famous NASCAR track like this gives us almost a bit of a NASCAR-style strategy. It's, of course, still very much road racing, but we're going to see things like bump drafting. We're going to see things like slingshotting under draft. We're probably going to see some very late race maneuvers, that have to do with pit strategy and drafting. We're going to see, people that might be a little bit more back markers staying up toward the front, because as long as you can stay within that gap, you can maintain the leaders, and it's really going to mix things up a lot.
Well, they're heading through the bus stop right now. The pace car is leading them past that last little chicane, and Dan Rash is now going to bring that Bitcoin car right up beside Brian Strodbeck's Turn 2 Motorsports Mustang. A black and a white car up at the front, good and evil, fighting it out, I guess you could say. but we'll find out which one is which soon enough, because we're going to get the green flag any moment now, as the Mustangs are looking to start away the season, coming through NASCAR 4 and off the banking any moment now. This is a very much anticipated season. So many changes, just like the Real World Series of the two-door series. These guys are going to have to adapt and learn how racing is going to be done in 2014. We're going to find out any moment now, with the pace car coming up to the pit entry. Should peel off any moment and let them go. There he goes. Green flag is going to be held up just a moment. There it goes. Brian Strodbeck leads them away. Dan Rash gets a decent run. It looks like Patrick Bieri does as well. And who is that behind them? That is Solon trying to hold on to him, as well as JD Baumgartner coming into the first turn. It looks like everyone is nice and clean. It's a long race ahead. Nobody's doing anything too anxious. And the Mustangs are going to get through the first corner clean. What's going on in ST, Kevin?
Well, they're still coming around to take the green flag. I'm kind of watching the jockeying going on in row 2. Richard Losper's kind of hanging back, but go toss it back to Mustangs right now.
All right, everything is still nice and clean up here, it looks like. Although, Patrick Bieri is slowed down. I heard that we had it off. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. And it looks like we've got the ST start.
Yep, the ST field has finally taken the green flag. A huge gap between them and the Mustang field, looking kind of clean, although Richard Losper got a terrible start, and he's dropped several positions. Sergio Moore very clean through turn 1, turn 2, and James Stevens snuck by Jared Jadis to take second place. So these guys are off, and they're going to be field going away, Joe.
Yes, and that was Patrick Bieri, who lost a little bit of a time getting squirrely, and then Steve Brown did the same, so there was no off in there. I apologize for that. Meanwhile, back up at the front, Brian Strodbeck currently has Dan Rash right behind him. He's holding him in check right now. I'm not sure if he's going to make a move this early on. He comes up right onto that bumper, and yes, he just holds onto the back. He knows that right now is the time to just settle in, get your rhythm in. They've got Oscar Solon right behind them. Oscar was a bit of a throwback from the first season in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series, and now he is picked up right where he left off, holding on to the podium spot.
And the ST field is looking a little clean. Guys are going side by side in a few places. Hang Ho Tao and and Travis Miv just went side by side through turn 6. Not really the place you want to go side by side, since you punish yourself on the exit speed leading onto the bus stop. These guys need to get a little bit more sorted out, work in the draft right now. This is still a little early to be kind of attacking, I think.
Yeah, it surprises me that they would be doing that this early on, but maybe they just don't want to check up at this moment. That could play into fuel strategy. The guys that learn to lift might be able to take just a slightly shorter stop and leapfrog, or either during a caution pit or during a live pit. But in the meantime, James Stevenson is trying to go back to his dominant ways, has already gotten past Mora for the lead.
Yeah, Mora got a bad run out of 6, and Stevenson got that draft and just drove right by him, and we have a caution flag already, Joe.
Oh, it looks like somebody ran into trouble early on in the season without even a lap completed. I'm not sure who it was. Let's see if we can figure out who caused the caution. Looks like it might have been Ed Verras. Let's go take a look and see what happened to him. He's currently going slow. Oh, and it looks like the bus stop took yet another victim. Coming out of the bus stop, Ed Verras just went a little bit wide, got squirrely, and it was off into the turn 4 entry wall. I'm sorry, turn 3 entry wall. And he went headlong into there, Kevin. So that's going to be a tall order to get that car back in good condition, especially with the aerodynamics being so important around here.
You know, Joe, there was a little bit of an action going on in front of him between Hang Ho Tao and Travis Mim. They were side by side on the entry to the bus stop, and I wonder if that just kind of threw Ed's timing off, because he looked like he was never settled going into the bus stop, and then just couldn't, got behind the car and was a passenger on the way to the wall. So, boy, I wonder if he just got a little surprised. Unfortunately, that car does not look very good to me. That could very well be the end of his race. A short one that would be.
Yes, and the bus stop is a place that we're going to have to watch out for. That's one of the ones that, to me, is a key portion of this track, Dusty. We saw it in the EPS race a few weeks ago that it's so easy to overshoot or just lose control through there, despite it seeming a relatively simple set of corners.
Yeah, the real tricky thing about the bus stop, it's getting through it is not necessarily tough. Getting through it while also being fast is extremely difficult. That particular, left-right motion that you do is like worst-case scenario for a car suspension. And furthermore, to get through it fast, you've got to be using those curbs there, which are fairly gentle, but they do affect the car. So it's really easy when you're transitioning from that left turn to the right turn and going through and trying to get the gas on as soon as possible so you got all that speed through NASCAR in 3 and 4. It's just like, it's a perfect storm that, if something in front of you goes a little bit wrong, it's really hard to check up there and not end up in a bad position.
As Ed Verras unfortunately illustrated. But we're going to go to break. We're going to take a short one with some music, since we've got a caution out. Let the cars circle their way around, get the stewards sorted things out, and we'll come back after this. Welcome back to Daytona for the first round in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series, and already we have a casualty before we've barely completed many laps. Poor Travis Mim blew his engine, so he is out of this race. So one of the ST drivers down and gone. It's going to be a long one to trudge through, so he is probably the first of many. We are currently under caution, but the lights are off, so we should go green next time by. Caution, if you missed it, was due to wall just out of the bus stop. He is actually, let's see if he's still in his pit. Yes, it looks like he's still trying to get that repaired. Since it's very early days, Dusty, it's one of those things where drivers kind of know there's still points to be had by trying to get it back out there and get going.
Yeah, definitely. There's a couple things about it. You know, in a standard race without the full course cautions, you know, that 10 minutes that it might take to do some optional repairs on your car to get it roadworthy again, you know, I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big chunk of the race right there. You're never getting that back. With the full course cautions, you've got a little more time to get some repairs back on the field, maybe just thing that happens this early in the race. You know, the more laps you can get down, the better off you're going to be. That 5 extra points that you might get from running a damaged car for a couple hours might win you the championship.
Yeah, and you can't give up. That's the nature of endurance racing. And we'll see a number of drivers as the season go on probably employ that strategy. Hopefully, excuse me, hopefully Ed can come back from his early problems and maybe make something of this race, although obviously something like a podium is pretty much out of the question at this point. He's already going laps down. We understand that we might have a few problems with our connection. We apologize if you're getting any stutters or errors on your screen. We'll try and do our best to fix any bugs that we get and fix all the gremlins. But we are getting ready to go green, so hopefully you'll be able to stay with us here as they are single file heading back to the line. The pace car is going to pull off any second now into the pits. Brian Strodbeck is leading them away in the GS class at the top of the Mustangs with Dan Rash right behind him and Oscar Solon in third. There goes the green flag. We're restarting once again. We've got 2 hours and 12 minutes left to go in this race. Brian gets a fairly good start, it looks like. Dan Rash is staying right with him. Same thing with Solon. Although Darius Bilowski was a little bit slow on the line. Not much harm done as they get stacked up into turn 1. It looks like everything is fairly clean. So let's go to the ST start.
Yeah, it looks pretty clean so far. James Stevenson leads them through, and then I'm not entirely sure who that is, but got a great run on, I think it was Bill Randleman, got a great run on the outside of Amjad Yaman, just drove right around him. They're side by side through the S's right now. So again, these guys are going kind of hot and heavy a little early in the race.
Yeah, and I saw Russell Clayson almost had a 3-wide situation with guys like Stefan Elwergaard for a second. Those guys were getting very antsy. And we've already got a yellow flag. I didn't quite catch what the accident was. Let's see if we can find it. Currently cycling through the field to see if I can spot someone off the track. I'm hearing some words from Bill Randleman, so let's see if we can spot anything near him. So unfortunately, it looks like we can't figure out where the Phantom Yellow came from. I did see that Randleman did make a bit of contact with Marco Mogren in the back of the field, but it looks like that was before the caution. So this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, Dusty. Yellows are breeding yellows.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about it, racing is very intense in general. But there's one thing that's both your biggest enemy and your strongest weapon, and that's adrenaline and how people deal is starts. I mean, you've got everybody bunched up around you. It's when you have a car that close in front of you, the natural competitive instinct is like, okay, there's a car close to me, I want to pass him. And you've got cars behind you, and you're trying to like keep up with everybody and push past people and take advantage of that opportunity of everything being so close. And you can't see the road ahead of you because your vision is blocked by other cars. It just gets unless you say, especially during maybe, you know, try to get past him later, just play it chill for a couple laps until things get sorted out, you have this problem where the restarts cause more issues.
And I wonder, Kevin, we're talking about there's a few rookies in this field, guys that aren't familiar with this style of racing. How much would you chalk that up to these guys just not knowing what Dusty just talked about, of easing back and knowing that they've got chances that they don't have to take right now?
Well, I mean, you've got... Sorry, Kevin. I mean, you have... normal iRacing official races don't have full course cautions. So it's tricky if you're moving from your standard iRacing service official races into one of these hosted sessions. This is not something that people tend to have a lot of familiarity with. Kevin?
Well, I kind of agree with you, Dusty, but the thing is that full course yellow was caused by two of the veterans in this series, Stefan Morian and Stefan Overgaard, had a little bit of contact coming out of the International Horseshoe, and that caused Morian to spin. And there were a couple cars behind him, and the yellow was thrown. Honestly, I think that may have been a little bit of presumptive yellow. It seems like everybody was through pretty well, but so it was essentially a solo spin, and guys just need to settle down. You're right, you know. So the veterans are aware of what they need to do. The rookies are aware of what they need to do. Now everybody just needs to go out there and do it.
Yeah, I mean, you got these really fast guys, right? These guys that put a ton of time and effort into getting as fast as they can possibly be. And it comes down to adrenaline again. You know, these are the types of people that have a really fiery competitive spirit. The spirit that it takes to just keep working, keep, you know, practicing, keep being critical of yourself and your driving and pushing and pushing and pushing. And that can come back to bite you if, you know, you get into these moments, this competition, you know, sometimes those leaders, those guys who are running up to top they fall for it just like the rest of us do.
We are getting some information from Travis Mim, who's told us that how he blew his engine exactly. It looks like he says that he took it out of fifth and went to drop it back in gear and got third, unfortunately, and that was the end of his day. So a very anticlimactic finish to a lot of preparation for the start of the season for him. We're going to see if maybe we could get him in and get some thoughts about this race from a driver that was actually down in the war zone. But it sounds like we're actually going to take a very short break. We'll be back from that in a second. Hopefully we can have Travis in and get a few short words before we go back to green. Welcome back to Daytona International Speedway. We are still under caution, our second caution of the day, and not even a half an hour into the race. In fact, I don't believe we've had a full lap of green yet. I have to apologize if I sound a little under the weather. That's because I'm fighting a little bit of a sinus problem. I'm doing my best to fight my way through it, though. But we have Travis Mim with us, the first DNF of this race. Travis, I imagine you're a bit gutted after all the prep to have not even gotten to complete a lap around here.
Yeah, it was pretty unfortunate. I put a lot of prep into this race, and it was just an issue with my shifter and me being a little nervous. I took it out of fifth to put it in fourth. I realized I was under caution, and I was just going to throw it right back in fifth gear, and took third. Been having a couple issues with the G27 shifter, and this time it just kind of bit me.
Yeah, and what is it? I mean, what's the attitude kind of down in the ST cars right now? Because it seems like guys are very anxious. Do you think people need to kind of ease up a bit, or do you not blame them for being a little bit antsy with the start of the season here?
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited for the start of the race. I was hoping that people were gonna be a little bit slow to start off and just take it easy. I wasn't really planning on making up any positions or anything, just running it out. And it seems like a lot of those guys have the opposite idea in their head. So we might see quite a bit more cautions unless people put it in single file and slow down a little bit.
Well, we're going to go to green real quick here. Are we going to see it at Sebring?
You will see me at Sebring, for sure. Hopefully with a couple other Blackadder guys.
All right. Look forward to that. Thanks for talking to us, Travis. Well, pace car is just getting ready to duck in. In fact, he does right now. That means that Brian Strodbeck is going to lead them back to the green for the third time today. Green flag waves. They start accelerating off through the tri-oval, Dusty. Yes, thank you. You are the Mustang commentator for today. And Dan Rash once again holds down second and patiently waits as they file into turn one.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of very well thought out driving from these Mustang guys. Very much keeping it clean. You know, Dan Rash, super fast guy. You guys mentioned Brian is maybe not perfectly speed-wise as fast as, you know, guys like Dan and Darius overall. He's very fast here.
Big spin in the S's, guys. Big spin in the S's, and there's another yellow out.
And it looks like there's another Mustang involved, and that is Duljan Boldrin. Didn't even make it past turn one this time. Let's see what exactly happened there. We're on replay with Duljan Boldrin. It looks like things got just a little bit stacked up in there, and they went four wide, almost went four wide, and he ran into another Mustang, and that just caused a chain reaction with a bunch of cars making contact. Doesn't look like anyone made very heavy contact, so I think everybody should be able, Dusty, to get back and get that repaired.
Yeah, that was definitely just a side-by-side situation. We had, you know, people going too wide. It looks like Matthew Oak, and maybe I'm looking from the wrong direction here to see where this kind of started. I see, yeah, Matthew Oak kind of went a little bit wide to get around the two in front of him, and he had somebody outside of him, and there we go. That's all we have it.
Yeah, that was Patrick Berry in the red and white car, and you know what? I'm going to kind of blame that on Matthew Oak. I think he went in a little too hot when there was a lot of side-by-side action going on in front of him, but I think that's just him being new to the sort of restarts that we were talking about earlier, Joe, and that caught drivers out. And you know, I'm kind of worried about the number 34 car of Philip Carpenter. I think he may have some damage to his left front, so hopefully he can get that fixed and still be okay.
Yeah, I think he was one of the cars that actually T-boned another one that was spinning. So you're right. He's probably got some serious damage up the front there. You know, I really do at this point chalk this up because Matthew Oak is another driver that doesn't have a lot of experience in this series. Like you said, I mean, too wide is difficult enough going through those S's when you guys are flat out. But trying to make it 3 wide and nearly 4, I mean, that was pretty much almost guaranteed to leave an accident.
Yeah, you know, turn one and is difficult enough, at Daytona, and when guys are going side by side, you really have to have your head on a swivel and be paying attention to everything that's going on around you, because as we just saw, it's so easy for things to get stacked up even more, because the track just gets tighter and tighter through turn 1 and into the S's. So if guys aren't sorted out by the time they're into turn 1, then it just gets worse. So you have to really be smart and keep looking eyes up and through the corner, and make sure that you're kind of predicting what's going to happen in front of you. And I think a couple of guys just weren't able to do that this time by.
Yeah, well, I just took another closer look at it, and what it really looked like, you had 2 cars running too wide. The 2 in the front got kind of close to each other. They checked up. They were okay, but they slowed down. But what that did is it opened up a path to the right of them that another car could have gone through. And both cars in the back made a dash to get through that gap. And that was Michael Oak was included, but I don't know that I would necessarily put the blame entirely on him. They were side by side, and looking at again, they both saw that opening and gunned it, and they both ended up in the same place at the same time.
Either way, we are in the unfortunate situation of not having seen a full green flag lap yet, guys.
Yes, in fact, we've just hit the half-hour mark. So I mean, obviously none of these guys need to worry about fuel yet, but I wonder if some of them are thinking strategy-wise, duck in now while all of these yellows are going off, and if everybody starts to get their stuff sorted together and get some green flag racing, you could be sitting pretty later on down the line. So strategy could yet come into play. Like you said, we have not yet had a full green flag lap around this Daytona International Speedway, and we've got about 9 laps under our belt so far. It's been an interesting start to the season. Guys are really having to shake the rust out of their system. We had a little bit longer break than some of them were used to, with us starting all the way at the end of February. Usually they get maybe a couple weeks break, and then they're right back into the thick of things. So guys maybe need to remember that they've got so much to go ahead of them, and just so much more to fight for than what's right in front of your face.
So I got a question for you guys who are a little more familiar with the strategy, with the full course yellows, the lengths of the races and stuff like that. You guys had mentioned that we're probably talking about a 2-pit stop race today. Is there a chance, with all the yellows going on, that some of these guys are thinking, I wonder if I can do this on just one stop?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that it would have to take a lot of cautions, because I know there are guys that tried to make it with no stops when it was 90 minutes, and I believe some of them almost did it with about 6 or 7 cautions, but that is a lot of cautions. So, Kevin, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to say that it's going to take a lot more than just what we've got here for them to make it on just a single stop.
Yeah, I think my back of the envelope math here, and arithmetic is always my strong suit, but I think my back of the envelope work here is that they've got to have 2 more yellows in this first fuel stint to make that happen. So it's possible, but I'm not entirely sure. We're looking at about 50 to 55 minutes of green flag running on a full tank. They don't save, well, actually, that's not true. They save a fair amount of fuel at Daytona under yellow, so it's going to stretch it out, but I'm pretty sure that nobody expected the first 30 minutes of the race to be under yellow, and so I'm sure that anybody that's got a crew chief working numbers is going to have a huge advantage for them right now.
And that's an aspect for those not familiar with sim racing, since all of this is in the virtual world, Dusty, might be a little bit surprised that these guys are so serious that they might have a team behind them. I mean, tell us a little bit about that and how iRacing implements that.
Well, it's from the technical standpoint, it's a feature that iRacing implemented close to a year ago, if I remember correctly. iRacing has a feature where it started out as a spectator feature where people can join the race and just watch the cars go around without affecting anything, and that's how we broadcast the race. They expanded that then to allow certain spectators, you as a driver can allow a spectator to communicate with you over the voice chat, which is normally not possible. And that way the driver from an external camera, like a crew chief in a tower, or looking at video feeds in the pits, he or she can be your crew chief or spotter. He can tell you, give you a little more information on what's going on around the track, and he can also, you know, make calculations for you. He can see your fuel loads and your you know, tire information and stuff like that, so you don't necessarily have to do that math while you're driving. And in races like this, it can be a big advantage, like you said.
And we're actually going to get ready to go green this time by. I believe the lights are off on the pace car. They're coming up to the bus stop, so they got a little bit longer to go, but we should hopefully be back to green flag racing here. Kevin, I kind of wish that we had a experienced crew chief in here who could tell us a little bit about what they do as the race goes on.
Yeah, if only we had access to a two-time championship-winning crew chief in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. That would be great. He might actually know what he's talking about.
For those not familiar, Kevin actually does act as crew chief for the Turn 2 Motorsports. Well, actually, we're getting ready to go to green, so unfortunately, I guess we have to leave off. We'll wait until we get a lull, but I do want to ask you about that because you could offer some interesting insight into what all is required of a crew chief, because I believe it's also psychological. You know, you just punching. One more time, we're going to get our fourth green flag of the day, and once again, for the fourth time, Brian Strodbeck is going to lead Dan Rash and Oscar Solin away as the GS class takes the green flag now up through the tri-oval. Let's see if we can get everybody through. Clean fingers and toes and eyes are crossed, knocking on all the wood I can find. Coming up to turn 1, let's see if the GS drivers are going to be clean. Front of the field is braking nice and patiently. We've got a few guys going 2 wide, almost 3 wide for Elliot Huffman back there for just a moment. Everyone's cycling through. It looks like people are being a little bit more patient. What's the ST restart looking like, Kevin?
Well, we've seen it a couple times now where guys keep getting fantastic runs on the outside line through the tri-oval. But now they've got a Mustang, the Mustang of Duljan Boldrin, in the middle of their pack as well, and he's kind of causing a little bit of chaos as ST guys are going, whoa, there's a Mustang here. But they're trying to keep it a little sorted out. Guys are kind of tossing around. That third step for the podium is very much a battle right now as Amjad Yaman and Jared Janis are kind of going at it a little bit. They're looking at each other, but they should just stay tucked in and let's get a green lap in, please.
It's looking good so far. As you mentioned, Amjad Yaman currently holding down third. Sergio Mora is in second with James Stevenson in first in the ST class. And it looks like as the infield goes on, everybody's kind of playing a little bit more patient. You mentioned with a Mustang in the middle of all these MX-5s. What is that kind of play like? I mean, what's the differences between these cars that can affect how you drive through this infield portion?
Well, honestly, I think it's a little bit more about trying to respond to how the Mustang responds, because the Mustang, he's never quite comfortable with what the MX-5s can do, especially when they're all packed together. And I think we just saw a consequence of that going into the International Horseshoe. Arthur Chan was behind Duljan Boldrin, kind of checked up a little bit. Richard Losper ran right into the back of him, crinkled up his right rear, but Losper took the spot. Now Arthur Chan side by side with him into the bus stop. So these guys got kind of broken up on the pack a little bit just because there's a Mustang around them, and now they've got a battle going on.
And it looks like Arthur Chan thinks better of it, but no, actually he stays side by side, and they've got another Mustang coming up behind them as well. They're still side by side coming back onto the NASCAR Turn 3. Now they're going to be able to get cleared by that GS car, and it looks like Richard Losper is starting to lose out on the high side.
He does. He has George Britton, who tucks in behind Arthur Chan right there and goes in. I wonder if Losper got a little bit scared by the Mustang of Jason Breifogel going by. As he made it 3 wide, the Mustangs can really easily just drive by on the banking. That's when they like to make that happen. But Losper gets a good run out of NASCAR 4. Not really sure what's going on there. He's pulling away from George Britton and Arthur Chan like he's on a rocket fuel or NOS going on. That was a little bizarre. That's pretty awesome to watch.
And coming back into one, let's see if Losper can make it happen. Outbreaks him as we've got a few cars stacking up behind them. That was Heng Ho Tao who had to really check up, and now he's got Matthew Reinhold behind him, so the action is shuffled back, but Reinhold doesn't quite have enough momentum. He blinks out just a little bit as his connection goes wonky for a moment, but it looks like the battle is yet to finish up front as Chan tries to make a move back into the International Horseshoe as Losper goes very wide out of that horseshoe, and now Chan has his spot back.
He does, and Joe, we should point out that this is a battle right now between the Turn 2 car of Arthur Chan and 2 Asbury Motorsports drivers of Richard Losper and George Britton. So I would expect to see Losper and Britton team up together in the draft here and just drive by Arthur Chan.
Yeah, I think Britton got a little bit boxed in, did not expect to find himself in that situation, especially with Richard being the slower car coming through NASCAR 3 and 4. But now they're coming back onto the banking. We'll see if their strategy plays out as you say.
Yeah, this is the time to do it. Britton needs to just tuck in behind Richard Losper. They need to get a little draft train going and not fight with Arthur Chan, but just try and drive around him. If they get up on each other's bumpers, and it looks like Britton's trying to do that right now, they can bump track. No, Britton's going to go underneath Losper. Losper's kind of pulling aside. I wonder if Losper just wants to follow George Britton right now.
Well, Richard might have gotten damage in that contact that he made earlier, so I wonder if he knows that and thinks he's not supposed to, or he shouldn't be the lead car at this moment. But now he's under threat from Hang Hotel coming into the bus stop. Oh, and there's just a little bit of contact, but it looks like they made it through fine. That was very touch and go for a moment there.
Yeah, that was a little bit of maybe of a risky maneuver there by Hang Hotel, but it worked out. They both through, and both of those cars have damage on the front of their cars. So these guys have not seen completely clean racing yet, even though we've been mostly under yellow.
And Stefan Overgaard has seen some action as well. It looks like he's got a car in his outside. That is Daryl Bennett, who unfortunately doesn't quite have the momentum. They get back in a line as Overgaard tries to draft Reinhold, who's got Hang Hotel ahead of them. So these guys are catching up to that pack that we were talking about earlier with all that battling going on. And this comes back to what we said a little bit ago about guys needing to work together. They're going to slow up and they're going to lose touch. Oh, and there's contact between Tao and Reinhold. One more contact. Overgaard now hits Reinhold, and they look like they just about made it through there clean. Stefan Mourier gains an advantage from everybody having to check up, and now they're finally through with Overgaard moving up a couple positions.
Well, Overgaard, ever the opportunist, made that happen very well. He's got a little bit of damage on the back end of his car, but now he just needs to kind of focus and try and catch up with the car in front of him. That's his teammate, Richard Losper.
That was for positions, I believe, 11th through 14th and 15th for all those cars, so a lot of them all together. Overgaard managed to move himself up into 11th now as he leads that little pack heading through. But wow, what a day is this. Overgaard, who was usually, up into second or third last season, now all the way down the field. So just tells you how much competition is here now.
Yeah, I don't think that Stefan Overgaard got the qualifying performance that he wanted today, and I think he's a little further back than he wants to be. Let me tell you, these AMS guys look like they have a setup for the ages right now. These guys look so fast on the banking on the track right now. It's insane. So it looks like James Stevenson, their setup guru, has hooked them up well. These guys are going to be a force today.
Well, sorry to jump in, guys. We did just have a position change for the lead. Dan Rash was able to get past Brian Stodbeck the last time there around the oval. Just got a good draft on him. He's been pushing on him the whole time, playing a good psychological game, peeking into his mirrors on every single corner, and managed to get past him. And then Brian Stodbeck just got a little loose and lost another position.
Yeah, I was just going to say he got very loose coming out of the International Horseshoe. Oscar Solon, the opportunist, managed to sneak on by up into second. So 2 positions within a lap are gone for Brian Strodbeck. And now Solon goes just a little bit wide out of the Western Horseshoe, but not enough for Strodbeck to try and get himself back into position for second place. So they're coming up. We're on board with Strodbeck and seeing what it looks like trying to chase down the leader as we come onto the oval. We are 12 laps into this race now at this point. We have gone for 45 minutes, and we are not even halfway through as we normally would be if it was last season. So these guys have a lot of race yet to go.
Yeah, we watching that battle for first there over the past few laps between Brian and Dan was really interesting. You can tell that Brian's definitely very fast here at Daytona, but you can just tell Dan is feeling very, very strong this race. The two of them are similar speeds as far as straight up last time, but that entire battle, Dan was putting himself in offensive positions at almost every single corner, and I think he really threw Brian off of his out of his zone by just pushing so much. There might have even been a tiny little bit of bumper-to-bumper contact there, here and there, but nothing that was really strong. And then, you keep that up long enough, and unless you've got somebody with a really, really strong will up front, he's going to break at some point, make a little mistake, and then you can get by, and that's what Dan did.
Well, meanwhile, it looks like there's a bit of teamwork going on between Solon and Strodbeck, as Strodbeck was trying to push him around NASCAR's turn 3 and 4. Didn't quite make up a whole lot of time. Guys aren't necessarily acclimate to it as time goes by. It looks like this battle has sort of sorted itself out, so let's hop back to ST and see what's going on over there, Kevin.
Well, the big mover is Amjad Yamin. He is second place in the ST field right now. But the top 4 ST cars, James Stevenson, Amjad Yamin, Sergio Moore, Jared Janis, and a little bit Marco Mogren, have finally started trying to just get some laps going, team up a little bit. And that podium, definitely right now, you can see they're each in each other's draft. Amjad Yamin looked to the inside but declined the opportunity to make the move onto Stevenson into turn 1. So these guys definitely, it looks to me like they have settled down. They're getting into their rhythm, and they want to just bang out some laps right now and try and pull away from any other car that they can do, which they have done, because the I believe it's 6th place car of Bill Randleman, he's about 6 seconds behind the car in front of him. So this front group is definitely trying to choo-choo train away from everybody else.
Doing so quite successfully at the moment. I was going to mention a little bit earlier, before Dusty alerted us to the action going on in GS, that Amjad Yamin had moved himself up into second, which we hadn't quite caught, and could be significant. Yamin is a guy that we've seen in the past really do well with strategy, and he is quite experienced with endurance racing, having taken part in things such as the Targa Virginia. So this is a guy that, I don't know about you, Kevin, but I expect to really start to shine as this season goes on.
I agree with you, Joe, and I think right now he is seeing the kind of driving that I think he's really good at, which is just kind of get some laps, get position to do that right now, and as long as he's doing that, he's setting himself up for a really good finish right now. We don't know yet if he's got the speed to challenge James Stevenson and get in front of him and stay in front of him, but with Sergio Mora and Jared Janis and Marco Mogren all hunting around right there as well, this is still anybody's race, and I mean anybody's race.
Now, what I find interesting about this lead pack is nobody is right on top of each other's bumpers right now. Everybody's keeping each other just a hand's width apart, and giving each other space, which I feel like is a bit significant, that they're racing so respectfully.
Well, again, I think these guys all know each other pretty well, and as I say that, Amjad Yamin pops to the outside of Stevenson on the run into the tri-oval, so maybe Yamin's going to make a move here, and yeah, he just drives right by Stevenson. So I'm not entirely sure what that was, if that was just purely draft, or if maybe Stevenson decided he didn't want to lead and maybe save a little bit more fuel and let Amjad go by. But these guys have been very respectful of each other right now. Looks like they also are sick of all the yellow flags, and they realize that, hey, there's almost 2 hours of racing left, and we can lose it here on the first lap, but we sure can't win it.
Well, Yamin decides he wants his time at leading, but let's go over to the GS class, because Dusty, it looks like there's action going on.
Oh, there's a lot of action, and not necessarily at the front. The guys at the front have a nice order going. They're keeping it clean. They're going to try to just break away from the rest of the pack and run a lot of laps here. But getting further down, back into about position 6, starting from, it looks like leading this pack right now, German Afanador. This pack is about 6 cars deep, maybe 7. These guys have been pushing really hard. Unfortunately, maybe for them, they've been, as a result, increasing the gap between them and the leaders. But I've seen these guys going pair by pair through the bus stop 2 wide. Just last time around, we had a 3-way bump draft between German Afanador, Steve Brown, and I believe Elliot Huffman. So, Elliot, who is actually diving into the pits right now, could that be a strategy stop? Or I don't think he had any damage.
We're getting close to the pit window, I believe. We mentioned earlier that these cars have about 55 minutes, so this could be a strategy call, especially if he knows they're losing time battling it out. So I wonder if maybe he's thinking, I'm tired of being slowed up. And maybe an early pit, if he's thinking another caution comes out, he could be sitting pretty with everybody else going in. That'll shuffle him all the way up the field. But let's stay on this battle, as Steve Brown is still trying to hunt down German Fandor, getting very close to the International Horseshoe. And behind them, Nicholas Bailey has Wayne C. Burke right on top of him.
Yeah, definitely, and it looks like yeah, right there behind Wayne C. Burke is his teammate Andrew Casey, and I see them making a lot of effect of the draft on the oval parts. So once they get around to the oval, I think they're going to be really strong. But yeah, here we go. Almost every one of these corners here we see Steve Brown coming right up on the bumper of German Fanador. They've spread out a little bit at this point. We'll see what happens on the draft here.
Yes, leading themselves around NASCAR 1 and 2. So it looks like he isn't quite close enough to make anything happen at this moment. He's going to start pulling him in now as they head towards the bus stop. See if he tries to make a move coming into here. Yes, and now he's got the speed going. It's really not advisable because these cars aren't the greatest at turning. So yes, he backs out of it, and they stay single file coming into the bus stop. So this battle is sort of kind of at a stalemate at the moment. But I believe, Kevin Brown, you've noticed something interesting as we hop back to the ST about Marco Mogren.
Well, Joe, there's a bunch of cones set up on the entrance to Turn 6, which they're just approaching now. So if you look to the right of the track, there's a long line of cones, and these guys use them as reference points for braking. But if you get a little bit too far to the right, you start clearing them out a little bit, and Mogren kind of avoided them this time. But last time by, Marco hit about every single cone there, and I think it kind of confused Russell Clayson a little bit, as all of a sudden all his braking points just disappeared on the track in front of him, and were bouncing off at about 60 miles an hour away from him.
And that's something that really doesn't have much of an effect for those wondering why they're able to hit these cones. There really isn't any damage caused by them in this virtual world. They don't have any weight as iRacing has added yet. So they are free to hit those cones, although I'm sure the marshals, if they notice that happening repeatedly, might frown a little bit on a driver going out of their way to cause a little bit of chaos in that way. We'll have to see what happens on that. Russell Clayson, though, Kevin, he's not a newcomer to the ST class. We saw him in Season 2, I believe, hop over to the MX-5s. But we're used to see him in the Mustangs, but he's faring well with a 5th place spot right now.
Right, Russell is pretty solid. He got around Marco Mogren last time by and doing pretty well. But yeah, he was in ST a couple seasons ago, was doing pretty well for himself. Had a little bit of a rivalry going with a couple of ST drivers and hopped over to the Mustangs. And last season we saw a little bit of a rivalry between himself and Steve Brown brewing up. And we kept hoping for it to kind of break out into fisticuffs, but alas, it never did. Both drivers were able to restrain themselves very well. But yeah, Russell's having a good run so far. His car looks clean, running those V Apex colors, and right now he's slowly moving back up to the lead pack, trying to catch up to them, as we've seen Amjad Yaman and James Stevenson perhaps slowing that pack a little bit up as they're kind of swapping positions around.
Yeah, in fact, those guys are pretty much right on the tail of them. They're not too far behind at this point, trying to make it a 6-car pack instead of a 5-car pack now. But these guys are definitely, this is where you're seeing the veterans and the wise old heads start to surface and work their way through. These guys, like you said, aren't really battling a whole lot, just making progress, holding their pace. It's so much about pace and endurance racing.
It really is, and we've seen here with Russell Clayson and Marco Mogren just kind of focusing a little bit, trying to drive with each other and just go, that they have closed up a little bit on that gap to the lead pack, and as long as they keep doing this, they're going to close up even more and get themselves into the hunt going on. So this is smart driving from these two guys. It's smart driving for the top 6, really, as they're all just trying to focus and put down good laps, and the net result that we've seen is that car, the first car out of that lead pack, Bill Randleman, he's been dropped like he's got a couple couple of anchors off the back of his car. This is not a slow ST driver in Bill Randleman, and we know he's running a good setup being part of that AMS team, and they have just checked out and left him behind. So this front pack is really putting on a show right now. Even though they're not putting on a lot of side-by-side action, these guys are hauling the mail, Joe.
Well, even though pace is one part of it, the other part of it is that it is mixed class racing, and that is coming into play now as the leaders in the GS class have caught up to the back of the ST field, and they're working their way through. In fact, now Brian Strodbeck is incredibly close to the back of Dan Rash, Dusty.
Yeah, these guys have been keeping it really close, especially this top three here. Dan Rash, Oscar Solin, and Brian Stodbeck. They've been running like this lap after lap. It's really going to get interesting once we get into the thick of the MX-5 pack because, you know, while it's fairly easy, in that infield it can be sometimes tricky for a single Mustang to get past a Miata. However, for three Mustangs to get past a single Miata is another thing entirely. So with the draft being such a big deal, it's, you know, common for, if you get split up by one of these cars, to drop back just far enough so that you can't stay in the draft of the guy in front of you the next time you hit out into the oval. So, you know, the guy in front can use that to his advantage. He's going to want to be a little more aggressive as far as picking through those MX-5s than the guys in the back.
And it looks like this is just the spot they don't want to be catching them as Daryl Bennett and Matthew Reinhold try to get out of the way of the leaders coming through the infield. This is where the cars are a little bit more evenly matched. They'll get a little bit of a stretch coming through the kink and onto the western horseshoe here as they look to all finally get past this pair of MX-5s. It looks like, yes, they're going to clear them all, though Oscar Solin, is he going to get by before the kink? Only just. He's compromised a little bit touch and go, but he makes it quite cleanly. Now into the western horseshoe. Next up is Stefan Moriane, but they've got quite a distance, so it looks like they're not going to have to worry about him until the banking, which is really the area where you want to catch these guys, Dusty.
Well, Joe, I want to jump in real quick. We need to, I think, stay on that because they're going to catch Stefan before they get to the bus stop, and it's probably going to be a little risky for the back of the Mustang field. So I'd like to keep an eye on that one.
So let's look at what Stefan Morian can see from his rearview mirror as they start to hunt him down on the oval portion of this track as the little speck that is Dan Rash starts to get bigger and bigger, and he's got a bit of a gap now back to the next two cars as well. It looks like they haven't quite caught him by the bus stop, which maybe I guess my timing is a bit off. I figured they would have gotten him before that, but now they should for sure get him before the start-finish line here as they come up to NASCAR's 3 and 4.
And
yeah, I think he's going to probably get through now that they've managed to get out of the bus stop and get there into NASCAR 3 and 4. It's going to be pretty easy to get past.
And you're going to see why the Mustang drivers and the ST drivers like to pass each other on the banking, because the Mustangs just fly by. Look at how fast they just blow by Stefan Overgaard. Like, he's standing still. So much easier for the cars to deal with each other. And Morian goes into pit lane, so pit stops have started.
And what's the speed differential like between these cars at the top end around this track? Because I believe turn 1 is the entry to turn 1 is the fastest portion.
Yeah, turn 1 is absolutely the fastest part on track, but it's not really quite as big as you might think. It's about 25 miles an hour, but, you know, on a track like that, 25 miles an hour is a pretty heavy difference.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, you know, 25 miles an hour doesn't sound like a lot when you're going, you know, 130 or something like that, but think about passing something at 25 miles an hour that's standing still. It's still a pretty good difference in speed. If you were to just, you know, rear-end somebody at that speed with that amount of difference, that would definitely be the end of the day for both of you.
Which is why it's so important to be able to implement picks. You know, this is a side of endurance racing and mixed class racing, of being able to use a car from the slower class and box somebody in, and it just puts them in a position where they know they have to lift and get out of the way and give away that optimal position. So you might see a lot of guys trying to utilize that strategy just a little bit as time goes on. Well, with pit stops starting in, we'll have to keep an eye on the leaders to see who is employing what. It looks like we've still got the same 4 up there. In fact, the same top 6, with James Stevenson leading, Amjad Yaman in 2nd, Sergio Moore in 3rd, Jer Janis in 4th, Clayson in 5th, and then Marco Mogren in 6th. These guys continuing to just dance their way away from the rest of the field here.
Yeah, we actually have a situation right now where the leaders in the Mustangs there had to go too wide into the bus stop with some MX-5. That was basically what we were looking at possibly seeing last time around, and this time it happened. And now, if you look, the front three of the Mustangs have now been split well apart, and none of them are drafting off of him, which leaves Dan in a good position.
And we're getting word that we had an accident with Jeff Jacobs a little bit ago. I'm trying to look back and see if we can figure out what happened. We understand it happened in turn 1. I'm not sure if we can get a replay.
Joe, I saw that. Yeah, he just kind of had a self-spun into turn 1 and hit the tire wall right at the beginning, crunched up the front of his car, and once he got re-going, he realized he was done. I think he is retired from the race right now.
And that's something we've seen actually even in other series and even faster cars. It's just so easy to find that pit wall. As now I'm going back and watching it. Oof, that was a fairly tough hit there. But that pit entry wall, or I'm sorry, pit exit wall, is just so difficult in its position, whether you're exiting the pits or just trying to brake for turn 1.
Yeah, you said it. It's difficult. It's tough in the Mustang. You're dealing with a lot of modulated brake pressure coming off the banking and onto the apron. You have to deal with the car, kind of bouncing around a little bit, moving its weight around. It is a tough corner. It's a fast entry, and it's not easy for anybody. And it looks like it just kind of caught Jeff out there.
Well, we're going to get to see some interesting action very soon here, as we've got the leaders in the GS class starting to approach the leaders in the ST class. That's Russell Clayson and Marco Mogren that's just ahead of them. They're not going to catch them on this straightaway, but probably coming through the tri-oval, they should get up to them. So now we're getting up to the fast guys or with the fast guys, and this is going to be an even more interesting proposition, because they're each going to want to be able to utilize each other, Kevin, to try and maybe make something happen, get someone separated.
And what we definitely know is that the ST guys do not want to get picked off their drafting partner by a Mustang, so they're going to kind of fight tooth and nail to make sure that they're in the best spot. We're seeing that right now. I think Russell Clayson and Marco Mogren are kind of setting each other up right now to make sure they're in the lead and they've got the best chance to break away from the other guy right now, as they've swapped positions quite a bit the last couple laps. And looks like they may not have to worry about it, Joe, because I don't think the leaders are going to catch them up until this sounds like we have a leader change.
Yeah, it looks like Brian Stradbeck is trying around the outside into turn 1, but he is just outbraked by Dan, and now they're coming up on the MX-5s of Mogren and Clayson. Not close enough, but they're going to catch them here in the infield portion, and let's see if they can try and sneak by before the International Horseshoe. This is where we're going to see guys go too wide, both classes. Who is going to lose out? It looks like Mogren is starting to lose touch in all of this, so this could be a bad situation for him. Dan is still too wide with Clayson, as now they finally get through, and it looks like Stradbeck was able to hold on tight there, Dusty.
Yeah, that was absolutely a great driving. Dan, really tried to make that move. When they all got split up earlier, by the traffic, Brian was able to get right back up on the back of Dan, leaving Oscar back a little bit, and those two were then able to use that draft to break away a little bit. I think, like Kevin, like you said earlier when we were talking, Dan does not like to be second. So when he's in second place, like we saw earlier, he will charge to get into first. But now that he's in first, we might be seeing that Brian's cool head is paying dividends, and he's going to start making moves here on Dan as we go around.
And one thing that's significant in this, Dusty, is that Oscar Solin has dropped like a rock. He is well back, almost 2.5 seconds there from the two leaders. So he is definitely the one that's lost out the most out of this. But now the leaders have caught the top of the MX-5 pack. And I don't know about you, Kevin, but if I was one of these MX-5s, I'd be a little bit nervous, because Dan has a bit of a reputation when it comes to dealing with interclass traffic.
Yeah, we've seen Dan be very aggressive through traffic and have a bit of intra-class contact, but fortunately for everybody involved today, this is going to be solved real simple this time by around, as they're all in the straights, and Mustang Field just blows right on by.
Amjad Yaman, meanwhile, is trying to challenge for the lead in the MX-5s. I thought I heard someone's engine blow somewhere along the line, or someone make contact with something. We'll have to see if we can figure out what that was. But Amjad was not able to make that pass into turn 1, slots back in the line, coming in. All four cars have not been They now have third place Oscar Solin in the way. He can be a little bit more patient since he doesn't have anybody trying to fight him right now immediately. So let's see if Oscar tries to give them just a little bit more breathing space.
Yeah, this is bad for Oscar right now. He's trying to hustle to get back up with those front two guys so he can stay in the draft with them. You know, he probably doesn't feel like he should be back this far. You know, he's a fast guy. He's been running up the top with all of them and has just been getting the bad picks in traffic. And here he's just got a sea of MX-5s in front of him right in the midfield. He goes a little loose there, man. He's really trying to get past him. Like I said, you start fishtailing a bit with the Mustang, and the car will get really loose on turn exit really fast. So here he's going to pull past this pack of Mustangs. We'll see if he can get back up to the front.
We're getting word that a lot of Mustangs are starting to hop into pits. So at, let's see, yeah, just about over an hour mark, it sounds like on by the leaders in the ST class and works on trying to reel in those top two GS leaders and get that time back. Maybe he can employ some pit strategy at this point, or maybe he should have, I should say, actually, Dusty. And I don't know, if you were Oscar, would you have maybe ducked in at that point before you had to deal with all those MX-5s?
Yeah, possibly. I'm going to see what he wants to do here in a second. Now he's got this big gap between the front, the front leaders. It's going to be really hard for him to make that up. Maybe he can just take this time where he's got some, clean air ahead of him to kind of think, maybe do some math in his head, and just focus on getting a really fast pit stop here in the next lap or two.
Yes, it looks like Andrew Casey is in for some sort of damage. He's been sitting in his pit stall for quite a while. I see that...
Dan Rash is in the pits, our leader in the pits. Actually, both Dan and Brian have decided to pit at the same time. Let's see how this turns out.
I was just say that as I was scrolling through. Get to his stall first, since it looks like they're both taking tires from what I'm seeing, Dusty.
Size of the tank in the Mustang, a lot of times taking tires really doesn't affect you all that much because it takes longer to fill the tank. So depending on how much fuel see they've both got all 4 tires, but they're still sitting there taking gas. Dan gets out of there first, just followed by Brian. It looks like they both had very, very similar pit times as they both left, I think, within a second of each other. So we might just find the race for the lead resuming right where it left off.
I think Brian Strodbeck was just fractionally slower there because he looks quite a bit behind. He definitely wasn't a second behind when they came into the pits. In fact, this is possibly what Dan Rash needs. If he can start to stretch that gap and pull away from Brian Strodbeck, maybe this is his pace and not think strategically for a while.
Yeah, well, there's a couple aspects here. It looks like from what we're seeing, Brian's pit stop was 0.6 of a second slower than Dan, but there's more to it than that, and it's an aspect of racing that a lot of times people don't think about, which is pit entry and pit exit. That pit exit can be really tricky. You're coming around a very flat section of the track, it's very narrow, and you've got cold tires, so, but at the same time, that's a corner just like any other corner on the track. So if Dan has practiced that pit exit a few more times than Brian, he might have picked up another 0.6 of a second just turning out onto the track.
Absolutely. But as those guys continue on around, it looks like we have to wait for that battle to really percolate. So let's hop over to ST and see what's going on. Kevin, who's the big battle?
Well, the battle is a battle of strategy and mind games right now. This top 4 in the ST field has basically not changed. These guys just keep trying to stay in each other's draft. I'm watching guys lift off and break early into corners to make sure that they're setting themselves up and getting a good draft. Guys are kind of weaving around trying to make sure they're in each other's draft. So there's not too much going on. You can see Amjad kind of poked his nose a little bit into turn 1 and immediately declined any sort of opportunity. So I think these guys right now are just settled in, waiting for the first pit stops to go, and maybe hoping for something to kind of change the strategy right now because they're not breaking away from each other. Instead, what they've done is they've broken away from everybody else. Marco Mogren is the first car behind this pack. He's about 9 seconds behind, and then about another 18 seconds behind is the AMS trio of George Britton, Richard Losper, and Bill Randleman, who are just kind of sitting and running laps, although Losper and Randleman just went into pit lane. So stops have started for the S field.
Now, I'm very curious about that pit stop strategy, and especially with these guys staying in line. Like you said, Kevin, some of them are lifting and braking early. I have to imagine that saves them some fuel. So, if you have got a little bit in your pocket, would you rather stay out, or would you rather pit with them and maybe short fuel it since you've got a little bit more and you know what the leader's doing before you know that you can watch them go in and just follow them in.
Yeah, it's kind of tough with this racing to really be good at short fueling, and not make sure you run out of fuel, on the last lap. So, I'm not sure. It's a little tough answer. These guys are probably helping themselves out by lifting a lot. I just watched Amjad kind of break a little for the bus stop, but I'm is a very fuel efficient car. Even at a place like Daytona, running in the draft, they're still going to be very fuel efficient. So I just don't know about the strategy. Maybe it'll work out for them, maybe it won't. I guess we're just going to have to wait and find out, Joe.
Definitely. So as this battle continues on, we're about an hour and 20 minutes in. We are going to hop to break just momentarily and let these pit stops play out. And in fact, actually, pit stops are happening right now between Amjad Yaman and James Stevenson. And there was a little bit of contact between Stevens and Yaman as they came into the pits. I'm not sure if that's going to affect them. Not sure if we should go to pits since this is playing out right now.
Yeah, let's stay with this, not go to break just yet. We can see the top four all in. They're all getting fuel. Not sure if guys are getting tires right now. It doesn't look like any of them are taking tires, at least from what I can see. Sometimes we get some bad information from iRacing servers and get tricked by that. But doesn't look like anybody's taking tires, so they're all kind of stacking up. Amjad Yaman kind of sitting by himself a little bit, which is probably a little bit of an advantage. He wasn't hiding behind, his pit stall wasn't hiding behind any other cars. We can see other AMS cars dropping in right now. And who was it? That's George Britton actually missed his stop, had to back up a little bit, Joe.
Oof, that's going to cost some very precious seconds. And Amjad Yaman is the first one to get out here, and Sergio Mora is pulling out as well. I did see tires go onto Jer Janis's car, but Yaman, who maybe he short-fueled a little bit, has managed to jump himself into the lead. Let's see if he can break this chain and maybe get himself a gap.
Boy, I don't think so, Joe. I don't think there's enough space. Mora's only, boy, what is that, a quarter of a second behind him or something as they exit pit lane. I just don't think with the draft that's enough to break away, but I guess we'll have to see.
Now, we talked about before the race that these tires need to warm up a little bit before you can start doing these fast laps. I'm wondering if, and I thought I heard somebody possibly blow an engine there for a second. I'll have to see if we can get information, but for these tires, with these MX-5s having to warm them up, I'm wondering if maybe that's what some of these guys are thinking to do here. Don't take tires until they're really, really shot, and keep them warm. Get back out on these already warmed up tires that they've got, and get the laps going again, and not worry about, excuse me, how fresh they're going to be.
Yeah. You're right there, Joe, but I think there's a bigger story right now, and that's of the cars who have pitted in the ST field. Stefan Overgaard is leading. He has stopped early. He took a very short stop. It was only about 17 seconds compared to the high 30-second stops of the top four of Amjad Yaman, Sergio Mora, James Stevenson, Jared Janis. But right now, Stefan Overgaard is your effective leader in the ST field.
Interesting how things have played out there. I did not quite catch his stop. I'm wondering, he's got Tom Eckline with him. Has Tom Eckline stopped yet? Do you know?
Trying to check that right now. Eckline has stopped, but Eckline is also 2 laps down right now.
Ah, so he is not in this race. But Stefan Overgaard pulling the wool over a lot of guys' eyes there. We'll have to see I know he's short-fueled because that's way too short of a stop. So maybe he is thinking do a short middle stint, do a long final stint, maybe bank on late cautions and know that he can get to the end when guys can't.
And I think maybe part of that was, his qualifying performance, I think, just wasn't what he expected to be. He was deep in the pack, and I think maybe he felt like he was getting slowed up. So pit a little bit early, don't take as much fuel, and get that track position. Let's see if this is going to work out for Stefan. This is a bold move, Cotton, shall we say, and let's see if it works out for him.
And it looks like Amjad Yaman has moved himself into second, which we did see with the exit of his pit stop. Sergio Mora in third, and James Stevenson following this entire trio. But interestingly, I noticed that James Stevenson had actually dropped off of the back of Mora. So it's currently Stevenson and Janis in fourth and fifth. We'll have to see if these two guys can work together and try to close that gap, get back up to that lead pack there.
Yeah, I'm certain they will. You know, Stevenson is just too good a driver to just kind of get left behind, although he may be toying with being out of the draft of the cars in front of him. So that could be a dream story for Yaman and Mora. But, that Mustang almost got into Amjad Yaman. That was the Mustang of Tim Broca. Nearly got into Yaman into the Western Horseshoe, but fortunately, it looks like both their cars are still okay.
No harm, no foul. So both of these guys were able to continue on. Maybe their hearts are moving a little bit faster, though. We are currently at with an hour and 15 minutes left in this race. So we are past the halfway point, I believe, if my numbers are correct. Almost past the halfway point. Pulled a Murray Walker there. So it looks like these guys are starting to think long-term, with guys like Stefan Oergaard taking alternate strategies, trying to move themselves and shuffle themselves around. We are definitely going to hop to break now and just stop for a moment, take a breather, let things play out with the rest of the pit stops, and we'll come back in a moment. Welcome back to Daytona International Speedway. We've seen yet another lead change in the ST class here at the 2.4 Hours of Daytona, the opening round in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. Sergio Mora is back into the lead with Amjad Yaman following behind, and hot on their heels is James Stevenson, last season's champion, trying to gun them down after losing time in the pit stops. Stefan Overgaard, who was our leader, pitted for the second time today and has been slotted back into 8th, but now he's actually 9th. He is among teammates, though, so this has helped him, as actually that's a battle going on right now as I look at it, Kevin, with Arthur Chan starting to get in the mix of these guys.
Dusty, go ahead. It sounds like we have something important
just
going on.
our leader, Dan Rash, has just pit again. You're talking earlier about a potential strategy of a really short middle pick. Dan just ran, I don't know, I want to say like 5 laps on his first pit. So we had Brian Strodbeck had come back up after their pit and was pushing Dan again. And then Dan just dove right back in. And that was a really, really short pit. What are we looking at?
Looks like it was about 12 seconds long. We've got an hour and 6 minutes to go, so this is probably going to be a bit of a tall order, but I think you're right. This could just be a super short middle stint, and he's thinking pit early in case there's any cautions and run it all the way to the end.
Yeah, I mean, if he can be easy on his gas, that's a lot of I gotta wonder. It'd be nice to see which of these guys has a dedicated spotter pit chief. And which of them don't, because that's some tough math to do while you're driving, and that's a risk. If he's trying to go that long, is he going to try to be easy on fuel, or does he just know at this point in the race that he can make it?
Well, let's go back to Stevenson, because there's a battle going on for the lead yet again, as the third place car, that red and green Castrol car, is trying to hunt down our 2 leaders of Mora and Yaman. Yaman currently back up into the lead. They've swapped positions for first and second already while we weren't looking, and now Stevenson is right up on top of them. He's already making a move coming into the International Horseshoe. Just outbrakes Mora. He gets that nose inside, and it looks like he's going to be able to out-accelerate him. Excellent pass there, Kevin.
That was well done, and that was set up just by several laps of just running hard, getting that draft, and as soon as he got the draft, he attacked that. Sometimes the only opportunity to pass is that very first opportunity that you get. James Stevenson made excellent work of that, and now he's got Amjad Yaman set in his sights. Let's see how this is going to shake out, because I don't know, Joe. I don't know if Yaman can hold him off. I don't know if Yaman wants to hold him off. This is all set up. We still have an hour to go right now, so, just about any store you want to pick, we can pick right now.
Yeah, it's way too long for him to be thinking it's go time and try and move his way up, because even if he gets into the lead, then he finds himself using, a little bit more gas than guys like Yaman and Mora. So, and also we've seen, James is a smart guy, Kevin. We've seen him in the past employ the pick maneuver to win. He did it at Kansas last.
I don't know, but we're definitely seeing Amjad try and take advantage of any little bit of draft he can get. He was almost violent trying to get into the draft of the Mustang that passed him right away. And so definitely Amjad, I think he's interested in trying to stay in front of James. But with the draft here, I think that if James wants to make it happen, it probably will happen. Stevenson looks like he's looking on the outside right now. So maybe he's looking for a little bit of side draft and maybe make a move. I guess Stevenson wants to lead. I guess he's just not interested in running from behind. Looks like Amjad's probably kind of facilitating that move to happen. James Stevenson is our new ST leader.
Perhaps maybe he's thinking he could get himself into a good situation with traffic if he's ahead of him and try and break that hold that the draft is causing between these guys. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's a good strategy in that sense. But Amjad Yaman, we're watching from his view right now as he follows the leader, as we are only an hour left to go in this 2.4-hour race in the opening round of the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. And James Stevenson has moved himself into the lead yet again. Last season's champion looking to kick things off with another win, but he's got a lot of challengers this time around. He's got some very fast guys snapping at his heels. But Kevin, Dusty talked about something once again that I wanted to talk about earlier, about the crew chiefs. Now, you, despite what we were saying earlier, you actually have experience as a crew chief for Turn 2 Motorsports. And tell us a little bit about, what's involved about being in that role besides just the number crunching. I mean, what do you have to do for these drivers up there?
Well, it kind of depends on your strategy for the race, but a lot of the things that I found were really, really helpful. We're just trying to remind the guys that they were doing well when they were doing well, obviously, and run fuel numbers for them when they got a little antsy, and reassure them about their fuel. But the other thing was just letting them know what other drivers were doing and kind of how the strategy of the race was shaking out for other guys, and that seems to be a really good indicator when you're able to remind your guy, hey, you're looking good, you're running well, you're hitting your marks. You've broken away from the rest of the field, so I'm just kind of imagining talking to Mora or Yaman, but just sitting there and just saying, hey, you're doing a good job. Just keep doing what you're doing because it's working out really, really well. And you can see that's working out really well for Yaman and Mora right now. These guys are hitting their marks. They're running well. They're running clean. And hey, what do you know? They're challenging the last season's champion right now, and they're looking really clean. Their car is clean, and they're just hitting these fast laps and making it happen. So this is the kind of thing you have to remind your drivers and do well of, and that seems to always help guys.
And I almost forgot, I saw a little bit of information in our chat here about Dan Rash. This is something that happened over the course of the break, Dusty, that he is no longer in the lead. In fact, he's not even in the top 5 right now, but I don't think we should be worried about that. What happened?
No, Dan, it's just a strategy thing. He dove into the pits and took a little bit of fuel, so he's a bit further back. I think he feels that he can probably, by taking that strategy, he can maybe save 5 or 6 seconds, early on, keeping a really short pit. I think he's probably got somebody calculating fuel for him and was just like, all right, now is the time. You can make it to the end. There's a number of things. If he's a little further in the pack, if he's not running in the front, he's got more chances to draft, so he's using a little less fuel. I'm not sure if he's banking on another yellow. I don't have the numbers right in front of me if he can make it to the end of the race using a full tank, but he's definitely further in the pack. But I think, I think Dan has a plan. I think he's probably going to be able to make it back up. We just won't be able to tell until we see the top pack start to pit again.
Well, Dan is an engineer by trade, so he's pretty good on the arithmetic part, a lot better than I tend to be. And I've seen the spreadsheet that he uses for fuel calculations. It is a complicated thing, and he actually works on it while he's driving. So I'm not really sure how that process actually happens, but he does actually change his fuel numbers and make sure that everything's going on. So, he must feel confident that he can get to the end of the race on the fuel tank. Personally, it looks to me like he's stretching it a little bit. So the other concern is that maybe he short fueled the first stop. Maybe he actually went back out and fueled up with just qualifying fuel and got 4 tires and completely screwed himself. It's a little early to tell yet, I think.
Ooh, that could be bad. I always sort of pictured him running a slide rule with one hand while he was driving.
And yeah, he is an incredibly cerebral driver, and I guess that's why he is so dominant in this series, because he's got that speed, he's got that aggression, he's very good fighting door to door, but it just seems like he's got the complete package because he's got the brain to back all that stuff up.
What I'm curious about is even assuming that Dan made a risky but or an unusual but correct strategy move given his situation. Nobody else is pitting yet, so it's obviously something a little different. What's going through Brian's head right now? Is he thinking, wait a minute, why did Dan pit? That's really... right now he's running up on his own with a gap of about 7.5 seconds to positions 2, 3, and 4, which is Darius, Belowski, Oscar Solin, and J.D. Baumgartner, who are still running very close to each other. And I'm watching very close to see if, with Brian up there running on his own, if those other 3 guys are going to start closing up that gap.
I'm sorry, that gap has actually disappeared. I was just looking at it, and they are right behind him, and that is because into turn 1, Jared Jan has just tipped into the back of Brian Strodbeck. That lost him a lot of time, and that actually damaged his car. So Brian Strodbeck is now in the clutches of Darius Belowski and Oscar Solin.
Oh man, that is terrible. I was actually watching one car behind him. I was looking at Darius at the time. Yeah, I took a pretty hard hit on that rear quarter panel there. Hopefully he's still going to look okay in this. It would be terrible to see him drop off the podium because of a little tap like that.
Well, and you know, that plays right into Dan Rash's hands, because Dan hasn't had a run-in like that we've seen so far. So this effectively means that once Brian pits, no matter what, he's going to have lost time.
So if you compound that with, say, Dan calculated that he can spend 6 seconds less than the pits by pitting right then, now what are we talking about? You know, we're looking like a 12-second lead for Dan.
So Darius Belowski looking to maybe possibly do more than just a podium finish here and get himself into second, but he's still got to fight off Oscar Solin and Brian Strodbeck to try and make that happen. Darius being a rookie to this series, but we are not unfamiliar with rookies coming in and dominating here, as we saw with Kimmo Suominen last season. So things are playing out. Very interesting moves are happening in the GS field. Let's hop back to the ST side real quick and see what's going on over there.
Well, there's a couple storylines going on right now. James Stevenson and Amjad Yaman have, I believe, broken the draft of Sergio Mora. Mora has been dropping back slightly a little bit, and I think Mora is just too far away right now to do anything. He's 1.7 seconds back, and I think he just can't handle it. Another story that we have is that teammate situation of Losper and Overgaard and Britton. They've been joined by the Turn 2 car of Arthur Chan, and I got to tell you, that car looks like it's been through the ringer. That right rear of Chan's car is just a mess. But this little 4-pack, they have quite the battle going on. And I think Arthur Chan probably feels like he's getting it from every direction from these AMS guys, just all over the place right now. But these guys are having a great little battle of their own running right now as they are through the S's in the infield. And I just don't know how this is going to shake up, but I think a big winner there is Overgaard, as we were talking about earlier, able to catch up with his teammates and has some action. But now we're just watching the red and white car, Patrick Fieri, move through this battle. Shouldn't be too much of a distraction for these guys.
Meanwhile, just behind them, we've got another battle going on in GS, and that is between German Fanador and Steve Brown. They were side by side through the International Horseshoe. Now they're trying to weave their way through this pack of AMS ST cars. Let's see if they can make their way through cleanly as they come up on Britain here. A Fanador trying to go on the inside of the Western Horseshoe. Just squeaks by. Doesn't quite give enough room to Britain, who has to weave just slightly. But now they're closing up on Patrick Pieri as well, so we're going to have a 3-car battle as we come onto the oval.
These guys have been fighting all race. It's been great to watch them. I mean, you know, a lot of intense competition, but they've been keeping it clean too. You know, going too wide through the bus stop, you know, getting side by side in the infield, you know, all the time. So I'm really excited to see how this is going to turn out. But, you know, that aside, speaking of going through traffic, Brian got slowed up by some MX-5s earlier, and now he's going too wide with Darius Belowski and Oscar Solin into turn 1. We have a 4-way battle for the lead right now, as JD is right on their tails as well.
All 4 cars together. Darius Belowski looks on the inside, and the International Horseshoe just gets the nose in, and now it's a drag race down towards the kink. Let's see if anybody is going to give it up as they head through that fast left-hander. Just a nose ahead for Brian, who got a better exit. Darius has to slot in behind. Is he going to try and look? No. Defensive move from Brian Strodbeck into the Western Horseshoe. Darius tries to go around the... Open the door for Oscar Solin.
Yeah, and Oscar almost made a move there to get into second coming out of that, but didn't quite have the launch. It's great watching these cars squirm around under braking. They're so big compared to the MX-5s. You really got to modulate those brakes. And we're going to see them come into the oval now. We've got a lot of, you know, they're looking to get back into the draft and come back up. I'm curious to see how these guys are going to make this move into the bus stop. But I think at this point, perhaps some of that adrenaline is wearing off, and these guys are just looking forward to turn 1.
Yeah, we've still got over 50 minutes left in this race, so even though this is a battle for the lead overall, these guys have yet to make stops, and as far as we know, Dan Rash could jump them all. But, you know, something that we were talking about a little bit earlier with how these guys made some aggressive moves in that little battle there, Dusty, is the way that patience and being able to jump on the littlest mistake, as we see Darius make a move around the outside as he's got the drag momentum. He's looking at the lead. Solon going with him, so if he wants to bump draft, he can help him out there. Just pulls up on that bumper, but doesn't quite make the contact. He's edged ahead. This is going to be a lead-a-lap bonus for Darius Belowski, and now Brian Strodbeck has moved back into third momentarily, under braking. Oscar Solon just edges ahead, but Strodbeck has the inside. Let's see if he can hold on to it. He's boxed in by Belowski, doesn't quite keep his momentum going. They're side by side coming through the S's. Who's going to be able to outbrake who into the International Horseshoe, Dusty?
Man, that is just absolutely intense. That the very NASCAR-like bump trap on the outside, but as we were saying earlier, Brian almost was able to take advantage of that and stay in on that move, but it looked like he had just kind of a inoptimal line going in there in the National Horseshoe, and wasn't quite able to make it stick. So Oscar Solon is now our second place driver, and Darius Belowski is now in first.
Yes, and Strodbeck has moved down 2 positions, so he is struggling right now. Is that damage going to hurt him that much, or do you think
I don't know. I think it's hard to say at this point whether they're that much, whether he's that much slower. I'll have to take a look back at some of my history here and see how his lap times have changed. But these guys weren't really dropping back lap after lap. I think a lot of the gap between them and Dan and Brian was largely due to traffic and just them competing with each other. So we might see, that the damage isn't really affecting Brian all that much. It's just this is just how the race is panning out, and now the interactions between the cars is going to keep these guys together.
Well, Belowski started to check out as they came through NASCAR's 1 and 2, but it looks maybe he can get that draft back and just hold on. This is really where Darius has got to push and try to get himself away from these guys, but he's got even more competition with Strodbeck and Baumgartner working together, bump drafting up towards. So these guys are looking to
even though they're not necessarily teammates, there's a lot of history together. As long as these guys have been running this car in this series, I imagine they probably know, quite a bit about how the other drives, and it gets to the point where you start to be able to communicate, non-verbally with these guys, and when JD comes up behind to push Brian knows it's coming. He knows that JD's a clean driver, and he's going to help him get back up there.
Well, we've got some stuff going on in ST. What's happening?
Oh boy, Joe, it's all going on right now. Sergio Mora was driving the laps of his life. He put down the fastest ST lap that we've seen today, and he did it without a draft. That allowed him to catch up to Yaman and James Stevenson. And as soon as he did that, James Stevenson ducked into pit lane. Stevenson's back out on the move right now, but this is an interesting strategy call. Looks like Stevenson's trying to short fuel it and maybe look for some track position, although he has put himself at risk for not being able to be in a draft, and I don't think he's going to be in a draft. He's got his AMS teammates a long ways behind him. He has Russell Clayson in front of him, also about 7 seconds in front of him, so this may not work out for James Stevenson. I'm not sure that was the right call. He needs a yellow now. Yaman and Moore need to start team up and put down some fast laps. This is going to make or break the win right now, Joe.
And I find it interesting that we've seen both Dan Rash and James Stevenson, both former champions, I guess Stevenson is a current champion, in this series, employ this long final stint strategy. I'm wondering if they know something the other guys don't, or if they just think early stops are the way to go. We'll have to see how it plays out. But like you said, Stevenson without a drafting partner now, so he is kind of out on his own adrift, and that might hurt him down the line. Meanwhile, Amjad Yaman is going to continue on in the lead with Morov right behind him in second. Jared Janis is in third, but he is a long way back. He has long since been dropped. And then meanwhile, Marco Mogren as well is quite a ways back. So a lot of interesting things going on in both classes here as this race continues on, guys.
I'm really interested here. This fight for the lead in the GS class currently, is exciting. These guys are putting on the line every lap. We just had a tiny little bit of contact going into turn one. But what makes me curious, we were talking about the damage on Brian Strodbeck earlier. I just went back and looked through his lap time history. And you know, just based on the few laps that have been had since he had some damage there, I'm looking he might be a half second slower now with damage. You know, it all depends on the draft. 8 at one point, was doing a lot of mid 204s, and since the incident, mostly he's been running mid to high 205s. He did just have one really fast lap that last time around, so we'll see. But he might have really just dropped back into the second pack.
Well, it's unfortunate to hear with Brian being one of the more dominant forces through most of this race. We've got 45 minutes left to go. As Kevin said, all he needs, though, is a caution to help keep him into the mix here. But Dariusz Milewski is really starting to check out now. In fact, he's got quite a gap between himself now that he's got Stefan Overgaard, that ST car between himself and Oscar Solin in second. This could be what Darius needs, Dusty.
Yeah, I mean, you know, he's super fast. If Brian, you know, Brian can obviously pull laps here at Daytona as fast as anybody, but if, you know, between him, Dan, and Darius, you know, those guys are all super fast. But if Brian has a little bit of damage, and if Dan made a bad decision on the pits, then that could just make it an easy win for him as he pulls into the pits right now. So we'll see how close this is going to be.
Yes, he actually had to check up a bit because he had a lapped Mustang. He was trying to get the left side of the track, so thankfully that worked out fine as he pulls into his pit stall now. But once again, we're seeing guys... Oh, and he just...
Ouch, man, that's, yeah, I mean, I don't know how... He's taken tires, so he's definitely taken quite a bit of fuel at this point. That's really interesting. He's pitting much later than Dan did. Well, I suppose he's running off more fuel. I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to do the math in my head to see if, you know, if he's taken this much fuel at this point of the race, is Dan going to be able to make it to the end?
That is the million-dollar question. Bilowski is already heading out onto the track. It wasn't a very long stop at all. So everyone kind of employing shorter stops in the second part of the race here. And Bilowski is going to come out. Where is Dan Rash, actually? Rash is well ahead of him from what I'm seeing. So Rash probably is going to have this thing sewn up as long as he doesn't make any mistakes and as long as there isn't any cautions. But that is never a guarantee in this series, as we've seen time and time again.
Yeah, if there's a caution, if maybe Dan was just betting on there being a caution, he's running this series for a long time, you know, just like there's always a caution at Daytona toward the end of the race. Maybe that's the case. It's really hard to go, especially towards like the really intense final moments of the race. You know, it's really hard when people are pushing like that to go without having some sort of incident. So if he's just banking on that, you know, put himself further back in the pack, it'll close up under caution, and then he'll rush past these guys. Maybe that's a thing. Maybe he found out that he could do it with the... Nah, I can't imagine a 3-pit stop strategy would ever be a good idea.
Came from...
Yeah, I gotta disagree with Dusty. I think that Dan just didn't get the right amount of fuel in on his first pit stop. I think he only put in a minimum amount of fuel, about 2 gallons or something, which is about 5 laps on this track. And I think he has screwed himself, to be honest. It just doesn't make any sense any other way, because he was looking at about an hour and 10 minutes, you know, on the third stint, and without a lot of yellows, that just wasn't going to work for him. I think Dan Rash is shot himself in the foot, guys.
Well, we'll find out in about 44 minutes' time. In the meantime, third place driver J.D. Baumgartner has slipped into the pits now, and he is going to be well behind Dan Rash, as Dan Rash has already passed the pit exit, and J.D. is actually just now coming out. So we're starting to get a feel for where guys are going to play out. But actually, significantly, I'm going back up to Darius, and it looks like... Where is J.D.? J.D. is slightly ahead of him, but it's going to be very close here.
Well, Joe, I just want to check in with the ST field. Jared Janis and Marco Mogren, who were in front of James Stevenson, both stopped. They must assert their final stops. So James Stevenson is our effective third place car right now, but he is slowly losing a couple of tenths every lap as Yaman and Moore are working together in the draft and banging out fast laps. And James Stevenson has no cars within 30 seconds of him. He is just out adrift trying to run fast laps, but it's a hard ask right now without a drafting partner. James Stevenson may have shot himself in the foot as well.
Yeah, it certainly appears so right now. And I'm looking down through this field to kind of get a feel for where everybody is. I see that Marco Mogren and Jared Janis are actually also working together here as they come through the tri-oval. So these guys, like you said, it's a long way up to James Stevenson. I don't think they're going to be able to do anything, but still, they're at least working together at this point. So a lot of stuff to chew on here for us to try and figure out who's doing what. If mistakes have been all and continues to actually right now, Oscar Solin is leading in the GS class. Brian Strodbeck is in second. Dan Rash is holding down third, although he has made his pit stop, and those top two drivers have not. J.D. Baumgartner is currently sitting in fourth. Darius Belowski is sitting in fifth. So that's our top five in the GS. What's the top five in the ST looking like, Kevin?
Well, as we said, Amjad Yaman and Sergio Moore are your leaders in ST, although it looks like it's about to change. Yaman has dropped below the yellow lines. I think he's going to go into pit lane. He has. Morris stays out. Morris is going to grab the extra points for leading the lap. That'll be his first ones, I believe. So this is going to change real quick. We'll have to stay with this a bit, Joe.
Yes, I'm looking to see where James Stevenson, he's going through the bus stop right now. Let's see how much time he lost, if he is able to hold on to Yaman. Yaman still stationary, filling up his car, probably going to be a short stop for fuel, I imagine, with only 40 minutes left to go in the race. Where's Stevenson? Coming around NASCAR 4 at the moment. Amjad Yaman still stationary, still trying to fill up on the fuel. When is he going to take off here? This is a very long stop, actually. Stevenson is coming around now.
Yaman has exited his stall. He is on his way, so this is very close. Maybe it's worked out for James Stevenson. I didn't think it is. It looks like Stevenson's he has gone around Amjad Yaman, so this did work out for James.
So either he had a much better stop, or actually that's got to be it, because you were saying he was running just slightly slower than those guys, unless traffic came into play somewhere along the line that we missed. So just, wow, once again, James Stevenson pulling the wool over everybody's eyes as Yaman is not even close enough to make something of the draft of Stevenson.
Joe,
hey, speaking of leaders in the pits, sorry to jump in. Our two leaders, Brian Strodbeck and Oscar Solin, have just jumped into the pits. Oscar got a little loose. Brian made it back into the front. So we had Brian in the front and Oscar in second, and they've both just pulled into the pits at the exact same time. So I want to see which one of these gets out first.
Well, right going by them now is Dan Rash, continuing to lead, and he's going to lead by a large margin, I have to say, because let's see, those two are still in, and who's going to be falling behind them? I believe J.D. Baumgartner is the next one on track. No, it's Darius Belowski. I'm sorry, I'm botching that name today. Darius is at least half the track behind, it seems. So Dan Rash has a gigantic lead, Dusty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'll see. Kevin was thinking that there's probably no way that he can make it through, on that one tank. So, he's got a really big lead as long as he doesn't have to pit again. So I just don't really know about that. Maybe it just worked out. But I think he probably made a mistake there. That's going to be really interesting if it works another way.
We're getting word that there is a 23-second gap to the next car back. So Dan Rash has got that much of a gap to play with as far as a pit stall. I'm not exactly sure how long the pit stops have been costing these guys, because they've varied it up. But we'll have to try and figure out, do some little math and see what it's going to cost him if he has to do a splash and dash at the end. I'm not sure that 23 seconds is enough for him to stop in, just take a few gallons and jump back out. But a lot of things playing out. Dusty, it started off a little slow, but this thing has certainly kicked off, and it's a lot to take in at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough, especially with things being really spread out with battles here and there. To even see everything going on the track. And the pit strategy happening and everything like that. This is a very chaotic time in the race. Things are probably going to settle down here over the next 10 or 20 minutes, and then we'll really see who's going to make it to the end up front.
Well, I'm looking, and Brian Strodbeck is actually right behind, or I'm sorry, was that Brian Strodbeck? Yes, that is Brian Strodbeck, who is behind JD Baumgartner. So Brian has effectively picked up where they left off with JD, because I believe he was part of that top group when all these pit stops started to kick off. Let's see as they go across the line how things are going to be ordered. It looks like now that pit stops have finished for all the top 5 guys, Dan Rash is leading, Oscar Solin is in second, Darius Belowski is in third, JD Baumgartner is in fourth, and Brian Strodbeck is sitting in fifth after getting some significant damage earlier in the race. And boy, that's got to be heartbreaking for him after being so dominant in the first half of the race and just can't seem to keep the car up at the sharp end in this latter half of the race.
Yeah, we'll see. I think he's got a chance to close it up. He's definitely a bit of a gap that he's got to cover here, but it's nothing that's insurmountable. Looking at his lap times, he has been able to pull it back together for the most part, and is running real close to his pace beforehand. So it really depends on how traffic works out. I was doing a little thinking. Dan Rash, he's fast. Dan Rash is smart. I can't imagine that he came up with some magic math that gives him 24 seconds over the rest of the field. He's not that much faster than these other guys. So, if we're going to put my vote on it, I'd have to say that, probably right now Oscar Solin is our leader.
Well, we have some similar contention going on in the ST field, because James Stevenson had effectively worked himself into the lead, even though Sergio Mora is in the lead right now, but he has yet to make his final stop. Apparently going to make a very short final stint here with 35 minutes left to go. But it looks like James had a bit of a...
Yeah, I'm sure that James Stevenson will make it to the end, no problem. The thing that doesn't make any sense to me is when Stevenson stopped for his second stop and Moore and Yaman were teamed up. Moore and Yaman every lap were faster than James Stevenson by several tenths, and yet James Stevenson was about 2.5 seconds faster than Yaman in pit lane. Or I should say in the pit stop itself, and yet Stevenson is now about 6.5 seconds in front of Amjad. Where did that gap come from? I can't find it. It doesn't make any sense to me right now, but the net result is Stevenson has a very handy gap over Amjad Yaman. So how's this going to work out when Mora finally pits? Where's Mora going to line up? Is he going to line up with Stevenson, or is he going to line up with the partner of Amjad Yaman? Also,
Well, I think maybe Stevenson had fooled you because his car isn't blue and says police on the side, because it must be a little bit larger in the inside for him to suddenly magically make up that time.
well, I'm not much of a Doctor Who fan, so I can't really tell you about that.
I was going to say, I hope my Doctor Who reference didn't fall on deaf ears. But James Stevenson also employing some very interesting strategy out on the field, but we're still waiting on Sergio Mora to go in and make his stop. Now, one of the significant things, and maybe this is what came into play with these cars here, Kevin, was that these MX-5s slow up very slowly, or fill up very slowly, I'm sorry, on fuel. So obviously taking on less fuel is a bit of an advantage in these cars to be able to save some time. I mean, even though everybody has to take the same amount to make it to the end, do you think Sergio is thinking, he knows a little bit more accurately how many laps he'll have at the end? Maybe this short stint will allow him to just be a little bit more spot on, splash and dash, and hop back out?
Well, he's certainly given himself that advantage. The risk that Sergio Mora is running right now by staying out when his competitors have stopped is if there's a yellow right now, Mora has effectively thrown the race away. So I really think that Sergio needs to get in before there's a yellow and fill up, and then he can go line up with Stevenson or Yaman. He is really hurting himself right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have to go to Stevenson right now. He just made contact with Wayne C. Burke. And it was multiple contacts as Burke was turned sideways, and that was in the Western Horseshoe. We're on replay looking at it right now, and you see that it looks like Burke did not know that Stevenson was there, just nosed inside, and he tipped him. And I'm not sure how much damage that caused him, but this could hurt his lap times. I'm trying to look at the front of his car and see what's going on there.
Joe, it looks to me like James has got a lot of damage on the front of his car. He needs a drafting partner, and he needs it bad. That has allowed Amjad Yaman to catch up very close to him. It's about a 2.5 second gap right now. This might be enough for Yaman, but I think it looks to me like Bork just got a little bit loose in the middle of the corner and left Stevenson with no place to go. I don't think anybody really made too many mistakes there. Just one of those things that kind of happens sometimes. And with both drivers kind of pushing it a little bit, I think Stevenson was the loser right now. But Amjad Yaman is closing like a freight train. It's only about a 2-second gap right now. This has got a huge difference in speed right now. I'm seeing about a 5 km/h difference on the banking right now that Amjad Yaman has as an advantage. This is big.
Oof, so it looks like James Stevenson was in contention for the win, and in a flash, it may have left his hands unless he gets some late race cautions here. And yeah, just look at that gap closing as they come towards turn 1 with Amjad Yaman braking and just, wow, very much closing in into turn 1 there. I'm pretty sure you're right. He is going to run him down any second now. But I wonder if James Stevenson just has some sort of curse going on around this track, because he wasn't able to win 2 seasons ago, and he wasn't able to win last season when his car actually stopped on track and ran into mechanical problems. This guy can't catch a break here.
No, he can't. Boy, that was just, just a moment, and it was gone for Stevenson. That's just, oh boy, that's a shame. However, he may be still a little lucky. If he's got enough in the draft of Amjad Yaman to be able to just stay with Amjad, this might still work out for James. So I don't want to just, completely cast him to the wolves right now, but certainly from the lead, he won't win this race. He has got to win it from behind. That's a tough ask to do. He's got to stay in the draft and make a last-second pass for this. I think that's his only strategy now.
Well, he did it once before at Kansas last season. I'm wondering if he can do it again. He's going to have to, it seems, as now we see that speed differential with the damage on James Stevenson car. Yaman going around the outside of NASCAR 2, but they're side by side, starting to pull ahead. Now he's clear of him, coming towards the bus stop on the back straightaway. This is probably going to be one of the important parts for Yaman, both this and the infield, where he's really got to try and make the difference and open up that gap for from him to Stevenson and try and get away so that he can't hold on to that draft. Let's see if Stevenson can hold on to it through NASCAR 3 and 4.
Well, the good news is I'm looking at that telemetry, that live telemetry coming off right now, and James Stevenson is getting a little bit of advantage in the top end speed, but Amjad Yaman still has about a 4 km/h difference, maybe 3 at the top end of the speed here. So I just don't know that this is going to work out for James. It looks like he may have too much damage on the front of his car. And Dusty, sounds like there's news in the GS field.
Yeah, I mean, first I was watching right up the front of the battle there. Darius managed to get past Oscar Solin. Going into turn 1, is a real close battle through the first 3 turns. Those guys are still fighting, get close to the draft. But then the big news: Dan Rash, as we suspected, did not have enough gas. He pulled into the pits. He's now well behind that front group of 4. I don't think he's completely out of the race here. If there's a yellow, he could get right back up into the pack and possibly charge through for the lead still. But he is definitely no longer our leader.
Well, while these two battle for the lead, I'm sorry, go ahead. Kevin's got information.
I think we were about to talk about the same thing. Our ST leader Sergio Mora stopped, had a blazing quick pit stop, 22 seconds, 3 seconds faster than Stevenson, 5 seconds faster than Yaman, has rejoined the track, and he is 7 and a half seconds into the clear, and the lead is Mora's race to lose right now. He is looking super pretty. Amjad Yaman 7.5 seconds behind Sergio. He's now a 2.5 seconds in front of James Stevenson. So Yaman wants some yellow action or something catastrophic to happen to Mora. Stevenson wants the same to happen to both of these guys. They need some outside influences, but with about 25 minutes left, are we going to get that still?
Yeah, it's in the very closing stages here, so these guys have all pretty much done their stops, I believe. I'm not sure if anybody still has yet to do their final one to make it to the end, so now it's got to happen on track, and like you said, a yellow can change everything, and often it has in this series. I'm looking a little bit farther down. J.R. Janis, how far back is he from James Stevenson? He is a long way back, so he is going to have to make up a lot of time if he wants that podium. But it could still be possible with James being a bit of a lame duck at the moment. But let's hop back up to that battle for the lead in the GS class, because that is still very close, Dusty, and it is still on. It's not for certain here at the end.
Very close battle here between Darius Belowski, Oscar Solin, Brian Stradbeck, and J.D. Baumgartner in that order, first, second, third, and fourth. These guys are coming around NASCAR's 3 and 4 right now, if I'm correct. Yes, they're coming in toward the tri-oval. Everybody's got their pit stops done with, and these guys are really pushing. This is the end of the race for them. Brian has pulled back ahead of JD, so he is now back on the podium in third. Coming into turn one now. We have very close. Looks like Oscar's getting right in on the tail end of Darius there. You know, these guys get so close to making contact, and it can be really tough looking over that big, the big hood of the Mustang to gauge where the distances are. And it's so impressive to see these guys getting that close over and over again. Here we go, going into the international. Almost got a two-wide situation there between Oscar and Brian, and they pull out of it straight, coming up through the kink. These guys are just pushing over and over and over again through every corner. This is going to run like this, I think, until the end of the race.
Yeah, these two are definitely, or these three really, are very much keeping it close. This almost looks more like what we're used to seeing from the MX-5s, with these guys just having a bit of a draft battle going on as the race goes on here. Been incredibly close up front. If Darius can pull that off, this will be 2 times in a row that we've seen the GS class won by a rookie. However, Oscar Solin, I can't recall if he had any wins in his season a long time ago with the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. It's been a long time since he's been here. But Brian Stradbeck, he is the one that for sure has had a win of this group. So he's got the experience. He knows what it's like. And Dusty, what does that do when you've got a win in a series? I mean, does that affect your confidence? Does it give you knowledge or anything?
I think it's more kind of a chicken and the egg sort of thing. It takes a certain amount of experience to get those wins. You know, so you're seeing the people that have had the wins, they know to a certain extent that it's not, you know, depending on how they win, you know, especially in endurance races like this, it you know that there are a lot of variables that come into the play. You know, the guys that get wins consistently, you know, they know that there's a lot of paths to get there, so they might be a little more calm, you know, when down to the wire as to gets you there consistently more often than not.
Yeah, racing is not just about brawn, it's about brain, and these guys very close on the back of Darius coming through the International Horseshoe, but now backs off as the accordion effect takes its toll coming through this infield here. So we've got about 20 some odd minutes left in this race, very close to the end. These guys are kind of waiting patiently, sizing each other up. I'm wondering if we're going to see a pass, a last lap pass, as these guys come to the line, with these Mustangs being very close, but nobody's making any moves right at the moment. So let's hop back over to ST and see what the situation is like over there.
Well, the situation is summed up pretty easily for James Stevenson. The win is over. He is losing about 2 seconds a lap due to the damage on his car. he is just a lame duck out there right now. The only question is whether or not he's going to be able to hold off Jared Janis for that final podium position. But Amjad Yaman right now is looking a little quicker than Sergio Mora. He's about maybe a third, a second, a lap faster the last few laps. Is that going to be enough to catch up Sergio Mora in this race? I'm not entirely sure it is. I think Amjad needs some outside help. Some action has been going on a little bit, though. We've talked about earlier the battle between George Britton, Arthur Chan, Richard Losper still going on, although this lap Richard Losper just got dropped a little bit, but Chan is still trying to hunt down George Britton. Maybe it's happening a little bit, going to happen a little bit here, as we can see that Arthur Chan is behind Britton by about half a second. It looks okay for Chan. I just don't know if he's going to be able to pass Britton. But the other big story that I want to talk about is Stefan Overgaard, that AMS teammate. It has worked out for him. Stefan has jumped a bunch of cars that he was stuck behind. That strange pit strategy has worked for Stefan. So there's still some action going on here in the ST field. But I think all these guys, almost every single one of them, is praying for some help with a yellow.
You know, maybe instead of the Flying Smurf, we should switch Stefan Overgaard to Evil Knievel, the way he's jumped cars in this race, up to 7th place. And where did he qualify, actually? He was farther down than that in qualifying, so he's done an excellent job. But he's got a long way to go up to Russell Clayson. He's another guy that's going to have to hope for a caution if he wants to make up any more positions. But we've seen in the past that just finishing up in top 6s and top 5s in the series can net you a fair amount of points. And we've seen a few guys, especially last season, who were able to finish in the top 3 in points and never even get a podium.
Dusty, how's the GS field looking right now?
I was just saying, we just had, looks like Oscar made a move for the lead back on this last lap around, and Oscar and Darius were too wide through all the way to the kink. So very close, and Brian is definitely taking advantage of that, using to stay close to the pack. Things have sorted themselves back out. We now have Darius leading with Oscar second and Brian Stodback in third, but I don't think it's going to stay that way very long. These guys are fighting. I'm wanting to see what happens in turn 1 here.
Well, unfortunately for the 49 Motorsports fans, and then there were 3, because JD Baumgartner has dropped, and he is no longer a part of this top pack unless something significant happens or these guys start battling. Like you said, Dusty, let's see what happens this time by. Is Oscar going to try and make a move? They're all closing up here. It looks like he's holding back this time, just closing up on that rear bumper of Darius and just trying to take it patiently. Less than 20 minutes to go now, as they have just completed lap 53. So these guys, or 2 I believe, these guys know their stuff. They know what to do. And at least one of them knows how to win a race. We did get information that Oscar Solin did not win in his earlier season in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. So it looks like the only one with win experience is Brian Strodbeck out of this group, who is patiently waiting in the back right now. And even with that damage, I mean, what do you think his chances are, Dusty? Do you think he can maybe pull it off on the last lap?
Oh, absolutely. It can sometimes be hard to pass, but, I think what he's probably sort of betting on right now, he's watching these guys, Darius and Oscar, really duke it out. Almost every lap, one of these guys is making some kind of move. I think what he's maybe looking for is these guys getting side by side. Bumper to bumper. I don't think that's because he's a little slower. I think that's because he's a little smarter. He's leaving that little bit of a gap. Then once these guys get tangled up in a corner at some point, he can use that gap to get a run out of the next corner and hopefully pass both of them.
You know, I'm looking back and I'm seeing some very interesting developments going on. A little farther back, Dan Rash in 5th is chasing down JD Baumgartner. But not only that, Dan Rash last time by a 2:04.6. Darius, our leader, a 2:05.8. So Dan Rash, he might have the pace to pull this off. He is closing in fast. In fact, right now he's within draft distance of JD Baumgartner.
Yeah, when he came out of the pits, he had a gap of about 11 some seconds to the lead. Now he's down into the 9-second range. Like I said, I think he can take advantage of these guys fighting up front to gain. Oh, there he goes. He's past JD.
Just slings on by. He has had a huge draft and was able to just blow by that 49 Motorsports machine as Dan Rash moves up fourth. Now he's got to next in line. Last time was a 1:04.6. What was Dan Rash doing last time? Or excuse me, 2:04.6. It was a 2:04.1 for Dan Rash, so still slightly better, but helped out by that draft that he had. Now he's got some lap traffic in the way, so we'll have to see how he deals with Matthew Oak and Matthew Reinhold, as he's got a few different cars up in his way.
Yeah, this is gonna get really good. This is a fantastic race. Darius still in the lead. Oscar behind him, Brian trotting along right back in. They're all within a half second of each other. Dan Rash still has to make up about 9 seconds. So can he get time that we have left in this race? It's possible, but without some big intervention, I don't know that he's going to make it.
Well, the thing that surprises me as we're looking through the field, because we haven't mentioned our drivers that have dropped out. We have very few out of 43 drivers after 2.4 hours of racing. Travis Mim was our first to go. Ed Verras is out. David Wammond is out. Philip Carpenter is out. Andre Trago is also out. And our latest, unfortunately, Alexis Molina has pulled into the pits, and he has exited out of this race as well. So we have about, I believe, 6 drivers who have gone from this race at the moment, which is surprisingly few. So despite the rocky start, guys, it seems like everyone's got their head together. We've had some excellent racing so far.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit before about making some guesses as far as the damage on Brian's car. And I think at this point we can unequivocally say that it is not affecting him. He has actually pulled his best lap of the race after having damage. On lap 51, he pulled a 2:03.74, which has to be pretty close for one of the fastest laps of the race.
Very much so. I'd have to check to see what the leader charts are on that. But it looks like we've got some angry drivers chatting away on the radio, not exactly sure what caused that. Stefan Morian seems to be a little bit upset with somebody. The marshals are asking him to keep it quiet. They do ask the radio to stay to necessary stuff. And it sounds like they're talking about contact was made. Matthew Oak was one of those drivers who might have been involved with that. I'm going to go back and see if I can spot anything, what's going on with there.
Yeah, Joe, it looks like Morian was hit by Matthew Oak on the approach to the tri-oval. Morian in the ST class was sitting on the inside, as he's supposed to do, on the banking, and Oak, trying to stay in Dan Rash's draft, came down and popped Morian in the right front corner. So I think Morian has very much a reason to be upset. We'll have to see if the marshals decide to do anything about that move by Matthew Oak, which I kind of expect they will, but I think it would be after the race.
Yes, they tend to employ post-race penalties here in this series. It looks like Moraine is able to continue on. He didn't hit anything. He took a little bit of a trip through the grass, and maybe he had to change his pants a little bit. But he's continuing on, and I'm not sure that he really lost any positions. We'll have to find out and see what happened. Hairy moment, though. But let's hop back up to the front, because I see that Oscar Solon is looking on the outside of our leader, Darius.
Yeah, he's trying to make this outside move. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it stick. Unless you have a really, really strong launch. He's got the outside going into turn 1. I really doubt that he's going to make this here, unless I might be wrong. He's in pretty close. He might have this going into the International Horseshoe.
Yes, he's on the correct side of the track as far as trying to make a pass goes, but he's lost some momentum. It looks like it's going to be a game of who can outbreak the other going into the International Horseshoe. Just given enough space by Darius, and now Oscar slots himself into the lead. but he didn't quite get a good enough exit out of the corner, and Darius is going to come back at him. Oscar still has the desirable line if he can just hold on to it. They're coming towards the kink. He's just running out of steam and has to slot back into second. It was a valiant effort, but Oscar challenging but not successful.
And Brian, I'm keeping my eye on Brian, and if everybody can, if you've got a view of him, watch him while these guys are duking it out on the front. You saw in the kink there, they almost, Oscar and Darius almost went too wide through the kink. And Brian, you saw him nose right up into the gap, and he backed off as soon as he saw it was closing. He's doing exactly, I believe, what I was guessing he was. He's leaving a little bit of the gap. Every time these guys get tangled up, Brian is just waiting for the moment for these guys to slow each other down and to rocket past.
Yes, playing a very patient game, and we've got about less than 12 minutes to go, I believe, in this race. Getting down to the very end here, we've got maybe 6, maybe 5 more laps to go in these cars. So these guys have got to make something happen soon here if they want to break away. Darius probably has to use traffic. He has to hope for something to give him a chance to try and get away from these two guys. They've been trying, they've been feeling it out, seeing what's possible. I wonder if Oscar is using this opportunity to make these attempts at passes to see what information he can get as he tries it yet again, Dusty.
Again. Yep. Here he goes, going to pull it up, and Brian is putting tons of pressure in. Oscar has gone up to try to make the high move. Brian is getting and almost giving Darius a little bit of a bump draft. I think he's hoping he can take the. He doesn't quite make it stick. So again, we've got a 2-wide situation into the turn 1 with Oscar and Darius. Darius just pinches Oscar off the track a little bit, and here we go. Brian is now going to make his move. He's getting up into the braking zone. He's inside of Oscar, running that inside line. I think he's just moved into second. Yep, he's pushed Oscar wide, so why Oscar didn't get a very good exit there. Brian is now in second place. Darius definitely got an advantage come launching out of that corner, so he's got a little bit of a gap, but I think Brian's going to close that up real fast.
Yeah, as we've seen throughout the day, that draft is probably going to close that gap. So, yeah, even under braking, he's starting to pull him back in as they exit the Western Horseshoe and get ready to come back onto the oval here. So the other thing that I wonder about some of these attempts, though, that have happened with Oscar trying to find his way back, which seems to have backfired, unfortunately, Dusty, is how does that affect the leader, though? If you're the lead car, I mean, does that give you information to know how to defend as well, which I think we saw with Darius in turn 1 there?
I'm sorry, I missed the initial question. What was the what were we referring to?
When a driver behind you attacks and starts to feel out to figure out what they can do, how does that inform you as a lead driver on defending? I mean, does that give you valuable information to use to help defend?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, anytime you make an aggressive move, other than just driving the normal racing line, it's you have to. It's compromise. You have to sacrifice something. So, a calm driver up front can, you know, if he can manage to keep his focus on the road ahead, he can use that to his advantage by just, you know, running some vaguely defensive lines, keep the guy behind from actually being able to make the pass, but use the fact that he is, you know, trying to push and get into these weird lines to shake you off, you know, and know that that's also taxing him as well.
Well, there was a half attempt from Brian Stradbeck for the lead, but they are back into the infield. Let's hop over to ST because we haven't talked about it for a while. What's the situation looking like over there, Kevin?
Well, why don't I just run through the field for you all so that you can kind of understand why we haven't been paying too much attention to them on cameras. But our ST leader is Sergio Mora. He has about a 6-second lead over second place Amjad Yaman, who has a bit of a gap. I think it's about 23 seconds behind Yaman to make up, which he's not going to do. Jared Janis is in fourth. He's about 7.5 seconds behind. That podium position is probably not for him. Marco Mogren is behind another 6 seconds. Russell Clayson's about 16 and a half seconds behind him. Stefan Overgaard is about another 15 seconds back. Then George Britton is about another 4 seconds back. But he's on the only battle with Arthur Chan, who's about half a second back. But I think Arthur has too much damage to really be able to make a move on Britton. We'll have to see on the last lap. Richard Losper has tucked it behind a wall in a strange spot. He is done. Bill Randleman and Matthew Reinhold do have a little bit of a battle going on, although I'm not sure that anything's going to happen there. And then it's pretty much over. There are no more battles in ST, so it's not really worth showing them on track, I am sorry to say.
And there's another car that's off track there. That is Hang Ho Tao, and he was sitting stationary for quite a while apparently. Maybe that happened between himself and Richard Losper. I'm going back to try and see if I can figure out what's going on here. In fact, yeah, Hang Ho Tao was sitting there just in the infield for a long, long time.
Yeah,
so,
I don't understand what happened there, Joe. There was nothing really I could see. He was... he did put it into the wall in turn 1, and then I'm not sure why he just didn't immediately retire. Maybe he was hoping for a full course yellow, but I guess he was told that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. So, excuse me. It looked like he thought his car was damaged enough that it merited it, but they didn't feel so. So, Hang Ho Tao now at least in the pits, and Richard Losper as well. I'm not sure that they're going to try and get those cars back out because it's going to be a long ways. Yeah, as soon as you mentioned Richard, I was kind of looking at him already and wondering how in the world he had managed to tuck his car behind the tire barrier, but I guess he was trying to get it out of the way so that he could get the car towed. But we have about 7 minutes left to go in this 2.4 hours. It is winding down. We just went through the ST field. Let's get back to the GS field, back to the front, where the top 3 cars, Dusty, are still all together, all battling it out.
Yes, they are. They haven't changed hands too much. We do have a couple other battles going on in the GS field right now. I believe right now we are looking at a battle, a very close battle that's been running for a while now between Elliot Huffman and Nicholas Bailey. There's also for a bit there Patrick Bieri in 6th and Steve Brown, who've been running very close all today. Those guys are also very close. And then of course, leading back up to the front of the race, we still have Darius Belowski in front, Brian Stradback in 2nd, Oscar Solin in 3rd, and then Dan Rash still he's in 4th, and he hasn't been making any time on those leaders. The leaders have been working together very well. He's back to about 11 seconds behind the lead, followed by J.D. Baumgartner, who is driving on his own right now, about 26 seconds back. Then Patrick Bieri in 6th, Steve Brown in 7th, Nicholas Bailey 8th, Elliot Huffman 9th, and Duljan Boldrin in 10th.
So there's your top 10 in the GS class. We're getting down to the final few laps. I believe we'll maybe have about 3 laps left this time by, as Darius continues to lead them around the place. I haven't had to been able to get my eye over on these Mustangs as they go through turn 1 here, Dusty. Has Brian been making any more attempts to try and get by, or has it been single file?
It's been largely single file. That had a really close moment there. I think Brian actually just gave Darius a little bit of a smooch on the rear bumper going into turn 1, but they all kept it clean. I think they've settled in pretty well, and they're trying, probably to make it possibly for a last lap pass. I don't know. It's hard to say. These guys are running so close. I can't imagine that any of these guys are fast enough to just say, like, no, I can definitely make a pass on the last lap.
Yes, it's a risky maneuver, but we've seen it pay off, in the past. I mean, back onto the banking now, back into the oval. It looks like it's going to be order as they were, as Brian Stradback isn't quite close enough to make anything happen still, and Oscar Solin the same behind him. Dan Rash behind them, however, hasn't been able to make the progress like he was a moment ago. In fact, he's dropped. He's now 11 seconds back. Last time by, it was a 2:04.6 for him, while it was a 2:04.3 for Oscar Solin in 3rd. So apparently it's starting to slip away from Dan Rash, as for a while it looked like he might have had a win, but at this point it's going to take a yellow or something drastic to make it happen for him. And even then, it's if a yellow comes out, it might just be way too late, because it could take us all the way to the checkers if we get a yellow this late in the game. Darius continues to lead them around on turn 4, and Dusty, I am extremely impressed with this guy. Rookie, even though he's won the championship in the official series, he's obviously proven himself well-versed in both multi-class and, oh, I'm sorry, as soon as I say that, commentators curse. Darius ducks into the pit. He must have short-fueled it.
Yeah, absolutely. That is very striking. Just a slight miscalculation. Probably his chief was telling him that he couldn't make the extra couple laps. I don't know. It's just one of those things, you got to run it down to the wire, but if you can't make it, it's a lot better to jump into the pits than to run out of fuel on the course and get a tow. So here we are. Brian Strodbeck back in the lead after all this, with Oscar Solin behind him, and that's it. He's got a 10-second gap to third place, so that also means that Dan has got himself back on the podium.
Brian seems to be something of a Daytona specialist, although I think he's got a little bit of lady luck on his side when it comes to today. He has had 3 races here in the 4 completed seasons that we've had in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. Of those 3, he's got 2 wins and a 3rd place. So this guy knows how to get up towards the front, and he's proven it yet again, although he still has Oscar Solin to fight back. And Oscar, without a win, he's going to be hungry for this. Darius is back out on the track. Dan Rash has moved up into the podium position, and this is what Dan Rash is going to need throughout this season to be able to keep racking up these podiums, get those good finishes, because we saw last season, Dusty, he kept wrecking out, and that hurt his chances to be finishing farther down the field. He needs to do damage limitation, as it were, on those days that he can't be up front and dominating.
Yeah, definitely. I think you were talking about Dan maybe dropping back just a little bit. I think at this point he's probably just he knows that that pit mishap, the fueling mishap, probably set him back a little bit. He's just going to be kind of conservative here, just trying to run laps, not do anything that's going to mess up his day and put him way back in the pack. 4th position is still a pretty good number of points as far as the whole championship goes. And here up at the front, we do have Oscar looking on the outside a little bit on Brian. He's not really pushing it, but I think he's just trying to make him nervous, put him into a defensive position. But Brian's having none of it. Here they are going through turn 1. And again, Oscar is just trying to put himself in any sort of position that's going to, give Brian a disadvantage, as Brian might have to give him leeway. But here we go into the International Horseshoe. Bumper to bumper, they're pulling through here. Looks like Brian gets a pretty good launch on the way out, so I don't think Oscar's going to be able to make a move in the next couple corners.
And this could be the last lap, which is significant as Oscar tries to hunt down Brian Strodbeck after all this time, 2.4 hours. It is down to this, possibly, as they go through the Western Horseshoe, still solidly in Brian's favor right now, but there could be that slingshot to watch out for, especially with a bit of damage on the back of Brian's car. We're not sure if that's slowing him up just enough to make it difficult to keep Oscar back, even though Brian's been running fast laps. This could be exactly what Oscar wanted. We talked about this since the very beginning, since the green flag of the race, that it could come down to a last lap pass. They're going through turns, or NASCAR 1 and 2 right now. We're still waiting for confirmation on the white flag. As soon as we find out, we will give it to you.
And that white flag is out, and I want to point out Oscar did himself a little bit of a favor by getting himself a gap so he could get a nice run through the bus stop here. Looks like he's doing that. Brian got a little hot in here. Joe, take it away.
And he's got a good run. He is right on the bumper of Brian. This could be a sitting duck moment for him. He's got 2 wins and a podium under his belt, but he might not be able to get that 3rd win today, depending on if Oscar has the run. He's on the outside, so he's got farther to go. He's edging up. The momentum is just pulling him up there. They're side by side. Oscar nudges ahead. He's got the lead now. All he has to do is hold on to it. Just barely up there. Brian's not giving up yet, but he's losing ground through the tri-oval. Who has it? It's Oscar. Oscar Solin wins the Daytona, the 2.4 hours of Daytona and round 1 of season 5 in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series.
Wow, well done. Only 0.044 seconds unofficially at the line. Brian just didn't have quite enough there to go.
That was an incredible finish, and I think that is possibly the closest finish we have seen for the lead on the Mustang side in this series ever. Meanwhile, Sergio Mora is still working his way around to finish the ST field. Amjad Yaman is a long ways back, unless there is a huge mistake by Mora into the bus stop or possibly running out of fuel. I don't think we are going to see a change in the lead here. Jer Janis has actually moved himself into third place, so James Stevenson might not even feature on the podium when all is said and done here. He is going to have to boogie to try and get that spot back, and I don't think he's going to have it. But meanwhile, Sergio Mora through the left and the right, through the right and the left, back onto the oval portion. This is it. He made it through there.
No, he's out of fuel, Joe. Yaman's passing him for the win.
Oh my goodness, both fields saw a last lap pass unless Amjad Yaman runs out of fuel himself, and even if he does, Jer Janis is a long way back. Amjad Yaman has a clear track ahead of him, cruising on to the victory. His rookie race, we've got two new winners in this series as Amjad Yaman comes to the line, takes the win in the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. Well done to him. Where's Sergio Mora? Is he even going to be able to make it? He's still coasting. Where's Jer Janis? I don't think Sergio Mora is going to be able to make it to the line here.
It's going to be close, that's for sure. He's moving at about 40 miles an hour. Looks like he's actually just trying to get into pit lane because it's the shortest distance to get to the checker flag. But yeah, Jer Janis is still moving. This is very close still. And I think Janis is going to take it, Janis. Janis has got it. Janis has got the second place over Sergio Mora. Mora has run out of fuel.
And James Stevenson is even going to beat him to the line, I think. Mora is still cruising. Yeah, he's going to beat him here as Stevenson takes third place.
Yep,
Just,
Stevenson
only
got it.
just.
Oh, unfortunate for Sergio Mora, just not enough fuel. He played it a little risky and then went too hard to run on him by himself, and he's run it out of fuel on the last lap.
And it looks like he's just going to finish in fourth place because Marco Mogren was behind the GS leader. So Sergio Mora is going to come home in fourth. What a finish. This is probably one of the best finishes I think we've seen in a while in this series. Let's go to break real quick. We are going to come back with the unofficial results and get you some interviews with our winners in both classes. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to Daytona International Speedway, where we just witnessed round one of the 2014 season of the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. The 2.4 hours of Daytona was capped off with incredible finishes in both classes, but our unofficial results: Oscar Solin is the overall and GS winner, and what a finish it was, just slingshotting past Brian Strodbeck in second. Dan Rash finished in third with a surprise podium after Darius Belowski ran out of fuel. Finished fourth. JD Baum. Steve Brown finished in seventh. Nicholas Bailey in eighth. Elliot Huffman took home ninth, and German Fanador was 10th. Dusty?
Well, we're going to go to our top 10 in the ST field first. Our winner there was Amjad Yaman with the surprise win. In second, limping across, George Janis was quite well. James Stevenson got the surprise third. Sergio Mora was the one that limped across with no fuel in fourth. Fifth was Marco Mogren. Sixth, Russell Clayson. Seventh, Stefan Overgaard. Eighth, George Britton. Ninth was Arthur Chan. And Stefan Morian was your top 10 finisher in ST, Joe.
And then the next 10 in GS was German Fanador in 10th, or I'm sorry, Duljan Boldrin in 11th, actually. James Brown in 12th. Wayne C. Burke in 13th. Tim Brokaw in 14th. Braith Morrow in 15th. Jason Breifogel finished in 16th. Matthew Oak was 17th. Mike Main in 18th. Jeff Jacobs in 19th. And Andrew Casey in 21st.
And then our final ST runners were Bill Randleman in 11th, Matthew Reinl in 12th, Daryl Bennett in 13th, Tom Eckline 14th, Richard Losper 15th, Heng Ho Tao 16th, David Whammon 17th, Ed Verras 18th, and Travis Mim was our first retiree with that blown motor on lap 1.
Well, we have our ST winner of Amjad Yaman here with us, and it was a surprise one, but I believe Kevin is going to talk to him.
Amjad, you were looking into a situation where you thought you might be finishing third, I think, with Sergio Mora and James Stevenson a long ways in front of you. And then, surprise, surprise, that race kind of came to you, didn't it?
Yeah, apparently it did. It was all down to the fuel strategy. When I pitted, I actually took one lap too much fuel, and I was thinking that's what cost me the race. But then I noticed towards the end, Sergio slowing down, so I was thinking maybe I got a shot at this, and complete surprise at the end.
Yeah, well, you probably, I'm guessing, were probably screaming to yourself in a little bit of happiness there at the end, huh?
Just a little bit. I mean, thankfully my mic was not hot at the time.
Yeah, that might have irritated a few guys. But, man, you had a great battle going on for, what, an hour and a half with Sergio and James?
Yeah, that was great. My strategy was just to stay behind them, save my fuel, and just let the race come to me through the pit stop. But I thought I blew it, but at the end, apparently I did not.
Well, you did exactly what you needed to do, and you got the reward today, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Object.
All right, next we have James Stevenson also ready to talk to us, and let's pull him in and ask about his race. James, early on, obviously, you were one of the contenders, which didn't surprise us, but then you had a bit of an unfortunate accident in the middle of the race. Tell us a little bit about that.
It's just the new GS guys being a little bit over-eager. There were dive bombs left, right and centre. I mean, before that, we had dive bombs before that series of pit stops. I probably would have been 10 seconds in front with nobody drafting behind me, but the GS cars kept dive bombing in wrong places, and it allowed the guys behind to keep closing back up when I'd break the draft.
Well, for the past two races, you haven't been able to get up and win this one here at Daytona, although it's a better finish than you had last season with your DNF. Are you... Our next race is at Sebring. Are you expecting more similar strategy with that one being a big draft track?
Sebring's actually not that much of a draft track. Most cars around there run pretty high downforce because the corners are pretty technical.
All right. Well, it's definitely going to be another interesting one. Like you said, there's that technical portion of the course. But it's a podium finish, at least for you, for this season. Are you looking to retain your crown, or do you think with some of these guys looking pretty fast here at the start, do you think it's going to be a lot tougher?
Well, I was thinking coming into the season that it could be pretty tough, but I mean, I was nearly half a second a lap quicker than them in free air today, so that really surprised me.
All right. Well, thanks for coming and talking to us, and we look forward to seeing you at Sebring.
Thanks, guys.
Also with us, we have Oscar Solon, who is the winner in the GS class, and I believe Dusty is going to ask Oscar a few questions.
Oscar Solon, congratulations on a hard-fought win. How are you feeling after that?
Really exhausted.
Yeah, absolutely. I figure if I was down there, my hands would be hurting right now, because that looked like it was almost 2.5 hours of non-stop white-knuckle racing for you.
Yeah, I was doing my best to just keep up with these guys, and yeah, in the end, really hard fighting, and yeah.
Now,
really
that last lap pass there, that we saw that kind of coming. As you came back out on the oval, it looked initially like Brian had a really great launch, and you were hanging back a little bit. Were you planning that? Was that you were setting up at the beginning, going back on the oval to try to get the pass out there after the bus stop?
Yeah, I kind of thought battling the last few laps would be stupid. I really went for that last lap, because then I wouldn't have to deal with turn 1 after that.
Yeah, definitely. And this is one of those tracks where you can really do that. You just got to get past that checker there. So how are you feeling now after this season opener about the rest of this season? I mean, there's definitely a lot of competition up here in the Mustangs. How do you think this season's going to pass out?
It's going to be just as much fighting as this race all season. I mean, these guys, it's the best field ever in the Mustangs, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, Oscar. That was incredible to watch. Fantastic win. It's good to see you out there driving clean. You brought it home with a clean car. A wonderful race. Congratulations. Looking forward to seeing you out there next time.
Thanks again.
And our final interviewee is going to be Dan Rash, who took home a podium in the GS class. And Dan, the million-dollar question that everybody was asking up in the booth is what happened with the 3 pit stops. You took a really short stint in the middle there, and we were all a bit confused. Can you tell us what the story was?
I guess I was just playing it more conservative than the rest of the guys. I'd like to know how much fuel they had to spare at the end, because I only had 2 gallons left when we crossed the start-finish, so I was a little bit conservative on my fuel estimates. But it still seemed like everybody would have needed to have 3 stops, so I guess the other 2 guys are just a bit better at saving fuel than I am.
Ah, so that explains it a little bit. We were all very curious about that strategy. You were closing in at the end, and then suddenly you found yourself with a podium finish. Are you pleased with that, or did you expect more today?
Oh, I expected quite a bit more today. I'm still happy with the podium. It was going off my calculations. It looked still pretty clear that we would need 3 stops, but I guess that was a bad miscalculation. At the time when I took my second stop, I was pretty excited to stop giving Brian a free tow and run some laps in clean air without giving any draft to anybody behind me. And so it was fun to drive the car. I still had a blast during the race, but at the end it was a little bit disappointing, because I think the Bitcoin Mustang had a lot in it, and I think it was capable of a win. It just came down to fuel strategy.
Yep, and it looks like that might be a key to the rest of this season, with it being longer races. Are you looking forward to Sebring?
Oh, absolutely, Joe.
All right. Well, thanks for talking to us, and best of luck at the next race.
All right. Thanks for the broadcast, guys.
Well, that concludes the race here at Daytona, the season opener. It's been an awesome start to it. I know I enjoyed myself, Dusty.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fantastic race all the way through. We had, in the GS class, just the battle for the front the entire time. Running these endurance races can be tough, even when you're driving by yourself, just to keep on point. Running in a pack of 5 like that for 2.5 hours, that's tiring.
Yeah, and I think both of us can attest to that, having both taken part in this type of endurance racing in this series. But we're going to take off here, but before we do, we want to thank a few people. Obviously, we want to thank Safecraft Racing, the official sponsor of the Continental Endurance Sports Car Series. They make real-world safety gear for motorsports and keeps everybody's noggins together. So we can't thank them enough for their sponsorship as well as for all their gear. Thanks to Wes Eric, the organizer of the league. Thank you to the software and hardware that we use, iRacing.com, XSplit, Twitch TV, Audio Technica, and AverMedia. Also, thank you to the team today, Dusty and Giancarlo and Kevin. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, you can find it at www.globalsimracingchannel.com, along with archived races and race highlights. We're also on Twitter at GSR Channel and Facebook at facebook.com/globalsimracingchannel. A special thank you goes out to Eric Ekholm, who provides us with much of our music. You can find it not only here on GSRC, but in TV commercials, movie trailers, iTunes, and Spotify. If you like our music, tell Eric where you heard it at ericekholm.com. Also, thank you to Casey Lalonde, who provides us with the music for our broadcasts. You can find more of his music at caseylalonde.bandcamp.com. I highly recommend going and checking out his albums. Our next race in this series, as we mentioned, is going to be at Sebring, and that happens on March 22nd, and that is a Saturday. It'll kick off at 6:30 p.m. Don't miss it. Going to be more exciting racing in this series. Our next broadcast, however, that takes place tomorrow. That is going to be the Piston Cup, the Oval Series. That'll be at 1:45 p.m. Eastern, Sunday, February 23rd. I'm going to try and hopefully get my sinuses better until then. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and I'll see you on the track.